And hello to YouTube. How are all of you doing today? Welcome to the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective's ongoing reading of Anti-Oedipus. We are making our way continually through the final section of the book, and it is going as slow as it always does. A little bit slower because I'm having a lot more fun going through every paragraph as deeply as I can. But again, all of you are appreciated. Thank you all for joining us today. If you want to join us live, you are more than welcome to join us in the Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. You can join live, make comments, yell at me in there. Otherwise, if you're ready, we're going to be diving into a lot, actually. I mean, a lot. As we made our way through Schizoanalysis, we've been working through, obviously, the whole book, and a lot of this is the culmination of that. Schizoanalysis has one negative, destructive task and two positive tasks. The destructive task is undertaken with the first positive task. Destructive task being the undoing of narratives, undoing of representational connections or symbolisms and things that seem to be driving a person forward, a person seems to be driving themselves forward. With that, it is not about rebuilding those with a different type of symbolism, which is what they call out traditional psychoanalysis for doing. Oh no, it's not these symbols, it's mommy, daddy, me. For them, instead, it's not those symbols. Instead, understand the forces and indices of desire and the forces that move through you. Those are the negative, positive tasks. That's the setup. As you move to the second positive task, they say pretty explicitly, the second positive task is about, and we will go back to it. One moment. One sec, that's page 347 is what we were on. I think it was just not far behind this. The second thesis, within the social investments, we will distinguish the unconscious libidinal investment of group or desire and the preconscious investment of class or interest. This is a big deal to, understanding people, but specifically within schizoanalysis, it's about helping a person sort of understand that within social investments, there's two ways that we invest ourselves socially, or we deal with the social world. The first is unconscious libidinal investment of group or desire. This is something that happens pre-subjectivity, pre-individual, pre-social, anything. Desire is first invested socially. This happens to be something like investing in superstructures at a large scale. It's not investing specifically in race, class, or other things, or nationality. Investing in nationalism, or that type of thing. Much more this. The preconscious investment of class or interest is that second step. And they're splitting these apart because it's very, very important, as they say here. The latter, which is the preconscious investment of class or interest, pass by way of large social goals and concerns the organism and collective organs, including the arranged vacuoles of lack. A class is defined by a regime of syntheses, a state of global connections, exclusive disjunctions, residual conjunctions that characterize the aggregate being considered. Membership in a class refers to the role in production or anti-production, to the place in inscription, the portion to the subjects. This is the selection of flux, the detachment of cause, the subjectivity. And at this point, it is about understanding where you exist from how you understand the social space. The second, the primary bit, the first bit, is that immediate investment. By splitting these apart, it gives us a very different understanding of how the human organism comes to invest itself or understand its place socially. Instead of it being coordinates of a handful of symbolic elements, it's actually far more complex and gives us a way for us to understand desire being invested or class interest being seen and achieved or attempted to achieve. The overall thing that they're talking about here is that question. Why do those who have or should have an objective revolutionary interest maintain a preconscious investment of reactionary types? And this is why they've split them apart. This is why they're doing this work, because the whole point of this is to drive them into two different directions, to have us have two different ways of looking at why a person sees their location or why there is tension within the organism at large. Yes.
There's two types, right, of investment. You mean there's the pre-conscious, which is pre-subject, right? Like before the subject, the dissolved.
Unconscious. The unconscious.
The unconscious, yeah, the unconscious, which is the before the dissolved subjectivity, like before apprehension, right? Before this, like the synthesis, I guess, or the synthesis is a line entangled within it. If that makes sense. Like the unconscious is like, it's kind of like I don't know, the eros and thanatos and these kind of things, which kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like before the synthesis, right? Be like a priori the synthesis, right? Or
It is a bit different than that. Sorry, I had to reset up my noise profile because it is coming through loud and clear, to say the least. I don't want any echoes. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about the two parts as a thing. First, and there's a reason they start with preconscious interests. Because generally when we talk about class interest as a thing, we talk about kind of what Marx talked about, this idea that the workers' recognition that their interest lies in opposing exploitation. For example, the bourgeois have an interest in maintaining private property and capital infrastructure as it sort of exists, right? That's kind of the thing we sort of are driving at when we start there. That's why they start there. But it's a very specific way they're talking about it. The way that they're talking about it is, how do I say this? These are interests articulated socially. Articulated is a big point of that because desire doesn't understand what it's investing in. The unconscious doesn't know it's investing in class or anything else. It's just simply connecting. It's just doing shit. The preconscious interest, which is down the pipe, you might say. It's a little bit later in the process. It's pre-subjectivity, but it's post-exclusive disjunction. But it utilizes the social elements when someone says, we the workers must unite. You are a worker. You were born as a worker. Care about a worker. You are a white man. You must care about white men. You are a children of the earth. You must care about children of the earth. Whatever that is, this thing that we've been continually told we find ourselves in, and these large social goals exist. This is because of the selection of flux that has happened. This is the either or of the disjunctive that's continually happening. That's conditioning the way desire works. This is downstream from the unconscious libidinal investment. Unconscious investment is that direct, immediate social thing. They say revolutionaries forget or don't recognize that one wants and makes revolutions out of desire, not duty. Duty is that second thing. That's the duty to one's class, that setup. This is, you might say, the more intellectual. I don't want to say that, but I'm edging towards that. The first thing is the molecular. The second is the molar. The way that these things work is investment in power, sovereignty, social organizations for their own sake, not with a goal in mind. The goal is the second part. The exclusion is the second part. But that unconscious desire for hierarchical structure, for example, or particular types of hierarchical structure, for being an authoritarian leadership. It's not a symbolic relationship like Freud would talk about with daddy or whatever. It's not that shit. It's instead the investment that's desire, investing directly in that general structure that is then repeated over and over elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and within the socies, and it's like work simultaneously, and it's kind of like it's kind of like the I don't know, but like in the poverty of philosophy, where kind of like how can we locate the social from this investment, and how can we recognize it as such? But like, how can we have this recognition as such, right? Like, how can we recognize it, kind of, or, anticipated it, right? But like, I don't know, like, how can we?
Well, and I mean, this is their response specifically to that. What you tend to find is, and it does work, a party apparatus, for example, gets introduced as part of a revolution. So people become invested in that. But the challenge becomes that even though they have, you might say, correct understanding of where repression's happening, or the correct understanding of their position in things. We are a working class party, for example. What ends up happening is the party may represent real working class interests. They may represent that. The interest can be found in them, but the actual organization as it operates, as the network effect of it happens, as it is structured, as it is put together, is hierarchical, is built particularly in certain ways that is about domination or personality cults, or as they talk about it, exclusionary practices. So these two parts are incredibly important when we're talking about the revolutionary capacity of humanity.
Yeah. It's kind of like it reminds me of the criticism of Marx lay on Proudhon, Joseph Bayer Proudhon, right? About like you have like you like if you want to study like the principle of authority, you have to kind of like go to the 12th century, right? If you want to study the principle of kind of like individualism, you have to have like you have to study the social relation. The principle is the century is in relation to the principle, not the principle is in relation to the century, right? So I think I understand now like some leftists in the Middle East have investment in democracy, but they forgot that there is kind of something that is investment in democracy, but like there's kind of like other people who have some investment to keep kind of like the third world countries in a state of limbo, like a state of kind of a state of kind of like dictatorship or something like that. There's something from outside, right? There's something like, for example, Marco Rubio, right? When he kind of killed by his idiotic bill, killed the USAID, right? And of course that is like capital reign over these people, all of us. But why Marco Rubio has investment?
So here's the thing. Yeah. It isn't that capital's reigning over. Capital doesn't have a goal in that sense. That's not how it functions. Instead, all of the things within it are aiming towards the same. Like, again, this is about understanding capital isn't like a thing where it's like, yes, USAID must go away. USAID can absolutely be absorbed into capital. Like, there's no reason that it couldn't be. In fact, it was a wing and an arm of capital for a significantly long amount of time. Getting rid of it is not in the interest of capital, but it works because capital can make do. The work to get rid of USAID has a combination of things. There is a drive, and again, you see this within Trump voters, I think, very well. There's a drive towards change, a revolutionary energy, but they understand and see their interests in the white power structure. So this combination puts them in the place where they see, oh no, our money, my money, this isn't in my interest to have this. Their interest is in that place, but the revolutionary capacity to destroy everything, burn it down and have that is actually pretty significant. And they come together into what is an incredibly destructive, problematic presidency. But again, what is it problematic for? Well, it's not problematic for capital. Capital will be just fine. It's problematic for the status quo, the general power structure, but I would argue the continuing sort of survival of a huge number of people who are dependent on that power structure. And so when you're talking about this setup, it's really important not to give capital too much credit. It is just a large-scale format of social elements. It is not a thing driving anything. It actually falls back on and takes control more than anything else.
Yeah. Marx mentioned that capital sometimes maybe it's connected with constant and variable part, but or maybe it's connected, but like the form of profit, right, and the form of circulation kind of acting independent from these, mode of production or means of production of constant and variable, right? Sometimes it's kind of act independent of it, but at the same time it's connected to it, right? It's kind of like booming, buzzing confusion, right? Mm-hmm. Like the circulating part of capital is independent, it's a pure phenomenal, like even the contradiction between the rate of profit and the rate of surplus value. The rate of profit is appear to us in phenomena, maybe in the social, organic, but the rate of surplus value is concealed, right? These relations are sometimes in whatever you live in, whether you're in America or Brazil or Algeria or Sudan, right? These things are concealed from each other, these relations, right? And just like Marx telling you just in volume 3, just kind of like, locate these kind of social kind of investment, right? These social kind of, relations, just kind of like in sequence, right? Like you have to, remove these abstract kind of social relations, and you have to kind of make it in logical sequence, right? In logical sequence, and these contradictions we have to kind of like grapple with, enable to kind of like, and the contradiction of the investment, right? The investment, like, given that
again, and this is where D&G have stepped away from the dialectic as as Marx talks about it. Even though I'm a big fan of it, I don't know if you saw my video. I hope you liked it. I really think the dialectic's powerful, but they step away from it because for them, the contradictions are interesting, but again, it presumes a handful of things, such as that things can collapse under their own contradictions. Instead, what we may consider, instead of contradictions that force something to change, what if instead what was happening is that the new form of things that's consistently pushing out new ways of connection, capital is able to justify and create axiomatics that bring it into the overall set of our understanding of how capital functions. So it's actually not about contradictions being resolved, but actually about the proliferation of contradictions that become covered over by the axiomatic, which is a much more affirming directive when it comes to like desire and production outwards, because to them, production doesn't start with man or labor or anything like that. It starts with desire and moves outwards from there.
So it starts with desire, and it's not like the old Marxist formula where you start with labor, with the social relations, with commodities, right, with these kind of blah 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 blah. Okay.
So let's read, we're going to read the last paragraph we did last week, go through it bit by bit because we have to. We're about to get into one of the most powerful ideas they have, and it's incredibly important for our date and time of life. And for me as an American, this is what I consider to be the powerful shit. And that is the nature of two types of groups, subjugated and subject. So be ready for that, but we're going to talk about that as we go. First up, though, as we read, the preconscious revolutionary break is what they're talking about primarily here. Again, unconscious libidinal investment doesn't have to be revolutionary as a thing, but the preconscious revolutionary break is one that is very interesting. It is always, as they say in the previous paragraph, it is sufficiently well-defined by the promotion of a socius as a full body carrying new aims, as a form of power, or a formation of sovereignty that subordinates desiring production under new conditions. Very particularly set up. This is not about, at any point, defining how desire can be fully free. When we do that, there is no social space. Necessarily, desire, as it's formed, as it's utilized, shifts, it builds, it grows, no matter what the form of social everything is. That social thing that's going to be next after capital necessarily has to define the promotion of socius that carries new aims, a form of power or formation subordinating desiring production under new conditions. This is very specific to how, if we want to talk about what comes after capitalism, this would be it. So, to read, the preconscious revolution. One sec. I'm just seeing that my fucking... There. The preconscious revolution refers to a new regime of social production that creates, distributes, and satisfies new aims and interests. But the unconscious revolution does not merely refer to the socius that conditions this change as a form of power. It refers within this socius to the regime of desiring production as an overthrown power on the body without organs. It is not the same state of flux and schizosis. In one case, the break is between two forms of socius, the second of which is measured according to its capacity to introduce the flux of desire into a new code or a new axiomatic of interest. In the other case, the break is within the socius itself, in that it has the capacity for causing the flux of desire to circulate, following their positive lines of escape, and for breaking them again following breaks of productive breaks. The most general principle of schizoanalysis is that desire is always constitutive of a social field. In any case, desire belongs to the infrastructure, not to ideology. Desire is in production as social production, just as production is in desire as desiring production. But these forms can be understood in two ways, depending on whether desire is enslaved to a structured molar aggregate that it constitutes under a given form of power and gregariousness, or whether it subjugates the large aggregate to the functional multiplicities that it itself forms on the molecular scale. It is no more a case of persons or individuals in this instance than in the other. If the pre-conscious revolutionary break appears at the first level and is defined by the characteristics of a new aggregate, the unconscious or libidinal break belongs to the second level and is defined by the driving role of desiring production and the position of its multiplicities. It is understandable, therefore, that a group can be revolutionary from the standpoint of class interest and its pre-conscious investments, but not be so, and even remain fascist and police-like from the standpoint of its libidinal investments. Truly revolutionary pre-conscious interests do not necessarily imply unconscious investments of the same nature. An apparatus of interest never takes the place of a machine of desire. They're laying the groundwork for the next couple paragraphs here, and it's really important to get this separation and the way they're talking about this very specifically set up. So we're going to go a bit sentence by sentence. If anyone has a comment, a thing, feel free, yell at me, scream at me, mostly make a note somewhere. Don't just scream. But we're going to go bit by bit because there's a lot in here that I want to make sure we cover. And if you couldn't hear, I'm not super big fan of how this is translated. So we'll be spending a little bit of time with that as well. So up front, the pre-conscious revolution refers to a new regime of social production that creates, distributes, and satisfies new aims and interests. The pre-conscious revolution here, they have this word refers. It's close in the French. There's actually a bigger push towards the returning, the coming back to, referring back to. The pre-conscious revolution refers back to a new regime of social production that creates, distributes, and satisfies new aims and interests. They've been talking this time about the kinds of revolution, pre-conscious or unconscious revolution. This is going to be kind of continuing to be the thing, to say the least. One second, I've got a fucking text I need to deal with. That our fridge decided to, the water line decided to break. So now we can't have ice or water outside of it, which is the best thing ever. We're waiting for that. So these two types of revolution, they've been talking about it forever. The whole point is that as we have these various social formations, right, each one has distinct regimes, aggregates of production as they set up. When we talk about the pre-conscious revolution specifically, it is the change between them, the transition between these regimes, how production and goal setting, how interests, how distribution of production, how all of these things are determined. It's a big deal. You have to remember, when we talked about the territorial, this isn't just that we became more advanced or that we have more money or whatever it is. The very nature in how we find interests, how we determine ourselves, how we figure out who or what we are or what we ought to be doing, that pre-conscious interest is a big deal. That's the whole point of this, is that the revolution for that would be new social production, creating, distributing, and satisfying new aims and interests. Last night I played the Whitest Kids You Know clip on anarchy, which I always have loved. For those who missed it, the anarchy happens and we have a revolution. It's a bunch of guys in a forest, and one guy goes, "Yeah, we've got it. Yay." And he goes, "Hey, my name is Bob. I worked at the nuclear power plant up the road. Just so you know, I've got to kind of go up there every day and make sure that's still going. Otherwise, one, we won't have any power, but two, that would be really, really bad." And so slowly, as he says this, the guy's like, "Oh, well, that's okay. You do that. Well, how am I going to feed my family? Oh, well, that's easy. We'll just take care of you." And it's slowly they redevelop capitalism. And it's because how do you determine what's important? How do you set that up? These are the things that make capitalism what it is, that made despotism what it is, that made the earth or the territorial system what it is. Those interests, those aims, and the things that satisfy them that are found within that setup. The preconscious revolution has to answer that. But, as they say, the unconscious revolution does not merely refer to the socius that conditions this change as a form of power. It refers within this socius to the regime of desiring production as an overthrown power on the body without organs. I'm not moving the page. We're going to stay here because it's of organs is on the next page. I don't really give a shit. The way that this is written in the French is slightly different. They really play with words here to really drive home the idea that there is a sort of rhythm of how this works. It refers within the regime, referring to this. The whole point of this is that the social machine that, again, codes and organizes desire, as they went through in chapter 3, but also chapters 1 and 2, this thing doesn't, how to put it. When we're talking about the unconscious revolution, the socius isn't really the only thing that's the point. It's also the whole point of how the body without organs, the organizational principle that is part and parcel of desire, how desire forms, how desire grows, is part of that as well. The unconscious revolution is not just about changing those aims. That's what the preconscious is. But the unconscious is also about shifting how the BWO functions or what it does or how it works, necessarily. The regime of desire and production is an overthrown power on the body without organs. This setup is the whole point. It is the recording service for revolutionary breaks. You need these two parts for them to give a shit about this at all, for this to be a thing that matters. Guattari says on YouTube, "Does for Deleuze, political philosophy is very fluid due to the nature of desire? Like, can there be no eternal questions of politics like the Hegelian narrative?" Well, given that there is no eternal politics, yeah, I would say, again, it's a philosophy of immanence and contingency. So when we're talking about this, the things that we would say, oh, here's how we get rid of, the capitalist system, if we ever did that, they wouldn't be a thing that we could go back in time, because the capitalist system as it functions now isn't even how it was functioning 60 years ago or 100 years ago. It's not the same. There's underlying things that make it the same. And some machinery, but some of that's also from the despotic, some of that's also from the earth, and these parts and pieces have carried through. So there's not a transcendent element or truth. That's Hegel's thing. That's what Hegel's thing is ultimately. So to continue though, they're comparing the preconscious and unconscious revolutions here, and what they're talking about. It is not the same state of flux and schizzes. In one case, the break is between two forms of socius, the second of which is measured according to its capacity to introduce the flux of desire to a new code or new axiomatic of interest. That's the preconscious. In the other case, the break is within, that's the unconscious. Goddamn my brain. One case, the break is between two forms of socius, the second of which is measured according to capacity to introduce flux of desire into new code, new axiomatic interest. In the other case, the break is within the socius itself in that it has the capacity for causing the flux of desire to circulate, following positive lines of escape for breaking them again. Okay, yeah, I had it right. Preconscious, then unconscious. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Okay. As they juxtapose the two of these, they're saying very specifically, when we talk about what comes next after capital, it is not just as simple as saying, oh, this other thing. Here's an idea. It's communism. You just need to understand where you're at. Well, how do you understand where you're at in my class interests? You just should, and there you go. Problematic, because it's not just that. The other part of it is measured by its capacity to introduce flux of desire into new codes or new axiomatics of interest. The other case, the break is within the socius itself, the actual social space, in that it has the capacity for causing the flux of desire to circulate following their positive lines of escape and for breaking them again following breaks of productive breaks. Jesus fucking Christ, the language of this.
Can I ask a question, Brooks? Introduction question.
I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to like make my way through this mentally because it's not a fun one. Go ahead.
Yeah, but these axiomatic of interest and these like codes, right? Mm-hmm. And these kind of things. Capitalism don't care, as we learned like from the book. Doesn't give any heck about our codes, our customs, these social codes, these social customs. Doesn't give any damn about them.
Sort of. So it doesn't care about them except as that they are fodder for breaking apart and creation of new.
Yeah, creation of new, and this within this break, there is also a form of axiomatization, or after the break. Because in a break, there is even anti-production in break, right? In break of these codes, right? The anti-production still flowing, still outflowing. Even if you have anti-production, even if you have a place where you have economy, a running economy, but there's some kind of like, I don't know, bureaucratic kind of oppressive codes and these kind of things, right? Social codes, right? These break of codes, these within their break, right? It's still capitalism, still kind of like break these codes and still have productive or anti-productive kind of value from it, right? Or I'm missing the point.
It's a lot to talk about because again, this sentence is getting to me because they are layering in a couple things here. We have to really break it apart, and it's the English translation is, we'll say, lacking. So we're gonna talk about with a preconscious revolution, with a preconscious setup. We have, they say, it's not the same state of flux and schiz. In one case, the break is between two forms of socius. In that, within this is an ensconced thing. The second socius of which is measured according to its capacity to introduce the flux of desire into new code or new axiomatics of interest. This is the one case. This is not. The preconscious and unconscious revolutions don't deal with flux and schiz the same way. They don't deal with the new or any of this. It's not the point. For them, again, the whole question is whether or not this new socius, let's say something shows up like capital did for despotism, is this thing, let's say capitalism against despotism, because that actually works really nice. We have two forms of socius, despotism and capitalism, okay? The capitalism, the second of the socii, of which is measured according to its capacity to introduce the flux of desire into new codes or new axiomatics of interest, which for capitalism versus despotism is orders of magnitude more powerful. So there is one step. And then you have the other. In the other case, the break is within the socius itself. capitalism, in that it has the capacity for causing the flux of desire to circulate following their positive lines of escape and for breaking them again following breaks of productive breaks. These are the two types of measurement and the way desire is able to find itself inside of these two, any social formation. And the question is, with these two, these are more attractive if you're able to, if the social system is able to, on the one hand, have a capacity to introduce flux of desire into new axiomatics of interest. Desire being introduced into new axiomatics of interest is huge. It means desire is able to find a place for it to see its own interest. And if so, it will do that. It will right there. Boom. This is how the despotic took over the earth, for example. This is how capitalism defeated the despotic and how something will have to beat capitalism. This is the setup we need. The other half, because that's, again, we're talking about unconscious and preconscious, but the other half of that is within the socius itself. Because for the socius to be successful itself, for the actual thing, it has the capacity for causing flux of desire to circulate following positive lines of escape. Desire is able to be invested and break apart and follow breaks of productive breaks. The whole point of this is that there is a self-renewing character that is built into this weird transformation. The flux cannot just escape once. Desire doesn't just escape and then settle somewhere else. That's not revolutionary at all. That's just out. But instead, you need to maintain revolutionary potential by continually breaking and breaking again. This is why capitalism beats the shit out of despotism, which beats the shit out of the earth, because these productive breaks, these productive setups allow new connections, new possibilities, rather than simply stopping or destroying, which worked. It worked until the new system of interest was able to be set up under despotism, which worked until a new system of interest was able to be set up under capital, and desire was able to find itself constantly broken and reapplied there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Through this break, you have multiple desire found the escape, and this escape is the escape of this desire kind of found, but desire doesn't care. But like desire doesn't care on the unconscious level. So, but like, does this kind of like break of codes? Does these codes return again, or does these codes after the break? After their productive flow?
So, well, that's the thing, is you go back and you look at how the Earth socius functioned, for example. Codes under the Earth socius may break, but they would reform. Godelier is a great example of this, the idea of cross cousins, which very particular social codes put people in specific arrangements of possibilities of marriage. However, when you meet a new tribe and you really want someone to get married, somehow the code would like bleep, and become, oh, look, they're cross cousins now, because the material needs of that shifted. And what that would mean is actually how we would define cross cousins, or how marriage would be defined within that tribe, would be shifted forever. The code would change, but it would sort of reheal itself until overcoding came along, and it allowed their local codes, have your cute little codes, but overcoding came along. And with overcoding, as long as the king was saying it, there was no, like, you could not break it. There was no breaking that. So overcoding kind of just ruled shit for a very long time. And it didn't allow breaks in the same way. It didn't allow the setup. But capital then found a way. Like, again, this is about these steps between these.
Thanks.
After Anna Brooks, I wonder if at any point we're allowed to ask about something a little bit outside the topic related to zoos. Yeah, I mean, I do other streams. This is our Anti-Oedipus reading. So do keep it to the text for this. I'll be streaming later tonight and probably tomorrow. If you only do during daytime, I'll find a way to do a daytime stream later this week. But for this, it's very focused on the text is the idea. Someone else says, I think their name is OnlyFans. I don't know what's happening there. I haven't watched enough of this guy's video, I think he's talking about me, to see if he's philosophically honest or another right-wing cuck like Jordan Peterson who twists people like Nietzsche to fit their worldviews. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so, but I don't know. Philosophy Tube fans have called me worse. So what can I say? So as we're going through this, these are the setups. These are the two sort of elements that we're talking about. The setups of how desire is able to interact socially, how it's able to find its interest, told its interest, find its interest, great, but also able to directly find infrastructure that it's able to deal with. No questions about scissor. For anyone who missed it, we did. I actually had some fun time with people last night, and we watched Nick Land. And a lot of people don't understand that Nick Land's a crackpot, but I think we spent time last night to really prove that he's a fucking right-wing lunatic conspiracy theorist whose brain was eaten by bad meth over the course of years and years and years. That was wild. That was a lot. But to continue, go for it.
He caught in mysticism, in mystification of social relation. He's end up in mystification.
It's a cute way to put it. I'll tell you right now.
That's a much nicer way to put it than I would put it. I would put it as he's a fucking grifter. But
well, I don't think he's a grifter. I think he's genuinely mentally unwell and believes it, and
I think it's much worse. I think he's incredibly mentally well and is appealing to mentally unwell people for like attention and money. And I think that specifically because like the way he answers questions is so evasive that it can't not be deliberate. Like he has to know that he's just speaking nonsense.
You'd think so. You'd think so, but I'm always surprised by people how far they can delude themselves. Like
that's fair. That's fair.
It's he's a character, but like I said, he's got extreme school shooter energy. That's what I get from him. But as I said to Afnan, who very lovingly did ask a lovely question, we'll talk about my AI video. We can even do it after this reading. I might stick around. But for now, the next little bit, the most general principle of schizoanalysis is that desire is always constitutive of a social field. This thing we've been talking about throughout all of this, and they've used terms like molecular and molar, and a lot of people get confused and fucked up when we talk about it, saying that there's two sides of a coin, or that it's like the yin and yang, which they the whole thing, the whole nightmare is that they're not two separate things that are on a coin. It's not the yin and yang, black and white, but instead that they're within each other, that there is one totality and also one multiplicity, and that totality is the multiplicity is the totality. This is why they use the terms molecular and molar. A mole of molecules, you wouldn't go, well, there's no molecules there, it's just a mole. No, it's a fucking bunch of shit, and that shit is still there. That's the setup. Desire, as such, is also, because of this, always constitutive of a social field. This is foundational to everything that Deleuze and Guattari would go on to write from this book on. Because again, it is not that desire responds to social formations or that it reacts to them. It actively creates and constitutes the social field itself. Social reality is not pre-given. It isn't a structure that desire inhabits. It is actual desiring production under specific conditions, determinate conditions. It is the movement of desire to being made concrete. This is all of the stuff that they're talking about here. It's the entirety. It's a big deal because this is the opposite of how we tend to, especially other thinkers, have thought about the individual, have thought about desire, and have thought about social reality. It is not that society shapes desire, and it is not that desire shapes society. No. Stop. It's that desire is actively producing social reality. There you
not
go.
ideology, not ideological infrastructure, not this kind
Nothing.
of like bullshit.
Yeah,
Okay.
there is no ideology for these guys. The opposite. It's a critique of ideology we're reading through right now.
Exactly.
The next line literally is, in any case, desire belongs to infrastructure, not to ideology. Desire is in production as social production, just as production is in desire as desiring production, right? It's a direct reference to traditional Marxism, this idea that there's an ideological superstructure that reflects this material economic capitalist base. No. For them, desire is the infrastructure. Lacan, for example, his ontology, his setup, everything he's put together is built on this idea that there is an unknowable real. And what we're doing is, because we can't give voice to the real, because the voice isn't the real, we're always dancing around it, or we're building up the imaginary and symbolic to deal with the real. They're like, no. And this was Guattari's major twist. And I think Lacan would be very open to this, had he been a little bit nicer about it, maybe. But it is not that. It is that desire is building the real. What it's producing is the real. That there is nothing else. There is no other layers. There's no other shit. What you're experiencing, what you're aware of, is produced by desire and desire itself, and also affects desire, but because it's desire affecting itself. That's it. This is the setup. It's the whole point. And it's why they've talked about desire and production and social production. It's why they use these terms, because for Marx, production's production. And Marx, they owe a huge amount to this, because Das Kapital, everything he did, there isn't like political production. There's not, like for Marx, it's like, so it's production. The social space is produced and set up, and here's how it works. There's material conditions and all of this stuff. And they're like, yeah, you just didn't go far enough. There is, like Marx understood, there is one process of production. But for them, it's desiring production. Desiring production appears as social production, and they are one and in each other at the molar level. And it's like that setup, just in the same way that desiring production is social production at the molecular. This is...
I should also... I'm sorry, I thought you...
No, please.
I was just going to say that in Marx, the whole base superstructure belief that kind of came later, he almost says the exact opposite of it in Capital, where it's not that... The way that this is normally put is that social relations hide material relations, but he literally puts it as the exact opposite, where material relations are the thing that disguises social relations in his belief, which I don't know. I feel like that has a lot more, applicability to Deleuze's system than I think Deleuze realized.
Well, just to say, the thing we were robbed of is that Deleuze was writing his book on Marx when he passed. So
yeah.
So I'm with you in that Marx is incredibly formative to Deleuze, and he owes a great deal of it. They're very open about, and I think a lot of people when they talk about Deleuze and Guattari, because they, especially in the English, they become even somehow more French than they were in the French, but they have a sardonic French quality, and not to be it feels like racist or whatever. They're not dicks, but they're dicks in a very French way. It's not an American kind of dickishness. It's a French kind. But that thing is mistaken as hatred or whatever. People say, Deleuze hates Hegel, or Deleuze hates Plato. Deleuze hates... It's like, no. Like genuinely, they did not hate any of these people. They used them to build upon and to create new things. And that thing they're doing, I think I'd have a hard time. Deleuze hated babies and dogs. I don't think I could say he hated a lot of philosophers. There are some I know he did, but it's because they weren't really philosophers, and he had a big thing about that. But this is the thing that, again, Marx's analysis of production in Gundry's and Capital, the entire dialectic method that he went through, Deleuze is basically taking that and grabbing Spinoza and talking about desire as productive essence. So when Guattari in YouTube, for example, is asking, that's why there's no ultimate political order which satisfies desire, as said by Deleuze. this is because desire is not seeking out anything. Desire is productive. It's an affirming thing. It's Spinozist, not the Freudian built out of lack, but directly Spinozist. This drive shifts how we consider the productive capacity. It's not really about satisfying desire at all. It's about understanding desire is continually doing things, and that shift in becoming, the flux of desire itself, is actually what is to be satisfied. It isn't satisfying desire. It's satisfying desire, having interest, being able to be invested, and finding that to be something that is itself satisfying as a process, which is more complicated. It's a lot.
I really appreciate how they do this here, especially when they speak earlier in this text about Wilhelm Reich and his questioning of fascism and how it came about, really, but and how they're sort of moving past the view that it was a matter of perhaps fascist ideology, which was manipulating people's desires or along those lines, but it's much more rather because desire is because there's no mediation between desire and the social field, really, or social production. They're both molecular, molar, one of the same ontologically. They do say there's a phenomenological distinction, but they're still ultimately like the same, you could say.
They are the same.
Yeah. Yes.
One is concrete, and the other is again. This gets into the idea of the virtual and the actual. That there is, it's not possible and real. It's virtual and actual, and the virtual and actual are one and the same thing, because ultimately the actual then, as it's happening, becomes ingested into the virtual, which again is actualized, and that process is ever going.
Yes. But yeah, I really appreciate this, because they come up with a very to me very satisfying and good approach to how those movements even come about, and how they aren't really divorced from desire at the molecular level.
Yeah.
Or really.
Well, and that's because I want to just continue, because the when we talk about desire and how it's set up, then when we have these two orders of things, or the two setups we're talking about that happen socially, and how desire is ultimately handled by being directly invested or finding its interest or any of these things. This next sentence is actually it. These forms, social forms, can be understood in two ways, depending on whether desire is enslaved to a structured molar aggregate that it constitutes under a given form of power and gregariousness, or whether it subjugates the large aggregate to the functional multiplicities that it itself forms on a molecular scale. This is where they actually are first stating what they believe is foundational for how we look at how social orders work. Desiring production and social production. It's desire all the way through, but their relationship and how they sort of are mediated, you might say. How desire and production can be organized. They start with, in this sentence, enslaved. So desire is ultimately subordinated to large-scale social formations, representation, symbolism, and other things. That desire produced these things. These are effects, more or less, that desire is like stuck underneath, built underneath. The hierarchical institutions of state, family, church, for example, control this. The word gregarious, it tends to mean loud and everything, but it tends to mean at large. That's what it means, at large, for the most part. So when we talk about the gregariousness, it's the pack mentality, the way individuals subordinate themselves to a group identity, a social conformity. It's about how we deal with things socially in groups. So we have libido that is able to, or finds itself, I guess I should say, finds itself enslaved to the structural molar aggregate that it constitutes under a given form of power and gregariousness. That's one way. Or whether it subjugates the large aggregate to the functional multiplicities that it itself forms on a molecular scale. This is the alternative. This is a revolutionary organization of desiring production. Because here, instead of desire being enslaved, which is the phrase they use earlier in the sentence, the molecular multiplicities of desire subordinate and use the large aggregates for their own purposes. So the question is, does representation tell desire what to do, or does desire do stuff with representation? That's the idea. At a base level, that's like the idea of this book, which is the setup. When we have people who are very deeply invested in, and desire is deeply invested in those hierarchies, the social stories, and we've all got them. I don't care who you are. We've all got them. When we're invested in that, when we're stuck inside of that as a thing, when those stories are controlling, enslaving, repressing desire, that's the investments in this large-scale social thing. Or is it that we use those symbols, we use those representations as effectively tools, and desire is able to build on them, to be creative ultimately with them? This is the big deal for them. Huge deal for them, actually.
And and I remember when I asked you about gender abolitionism, this was sort of your answer. This essentially saying this, and
are things prescriptive or descriptive, or can they be used? Like can desire use the thing? And then I just want to make sure I get the parenthetical. It is no more a case of persons or individuals in this instance than in the other. This is not about you or people or anything. Oh, I'm going to subordinate. Well, you already fucked up. You've already fucked up as a thing because you're doing it. The whole thing here is, and they used this term earlier, is trans individual. This doesn't mean a trans person. It's nothing against trans people. Just they don't mean it in that sense. What they mean is across, beyond. It is outside of the idea of the individual or the person. And the whole point.
Isn't that from Simondon?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
Oh no, this is Simondon, Rière, and I mean, I would say those are the two big ones. The transhuman, as a thing, because that's the idea. This is like transhuman. The molar and molecular are outside of the individual. They are about collective assemblages or arrangements of things, rather than anyone's personal psychology or setup. It's not about anyone's personal setup. Again, this is opposing, and there's reason they're saying this, because they're directly opposing Freud's thing for the most part, but also like a lot of shit. I mean, this sentence, even though Foucault never really liked this book, this is the stuff he references when he starts talking about the trans individual and his critique of humanism and these other things. It's a big deal. Big deal. Good point.
And biopolitics. Also,
biopolitics is like, the big deal. Someone on YouTube, welcome Piranha Lasagna. This is so abstract versus game theory. Markets, relationships, geopolitics make total sense to me via game theory, whereas the text appears extremely wishy-washy. Well then, I mean, you're mistaken about game theory being effective. Game theory presumes the ability for someone to lay out all the potential measurements and ins and outs of every single thing without delving into the actual lived experience or the actual, desire pathways of those things. By doing so, you've presumed a totality of knowledge, and then your output necessitates that is the totality. If anyone introduces anything else, it falls apart. So game theory has been long sort of tossed away as useful, because primarily there's a huge amount of things that we don't understand. There's things, as the quadrant goes, Donald Rumsfeld earlier in my life, there's known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know, things we don't know that we know. Both of those don't even get factors into game theory. And so as such, you're missing a huge amount of things. It's one of the great challenges. This text isn't wishy-washy at all. It's actually extremely direct. It just is a matter of sort of grasping what they're talking about, which is fine. Takes a lot of work. Always has. But they go on to say, back to the text. If the preconscious revolutionary break appears at the first level and is defined by the characteristics of a new aggregate, the unconscious or libidinal break belongs to the second level and is defined by the driving role of desiring production and the position of its multiplicities. So again, the preconscious revolution from earlier in here is sort of being tossed back in, right? This is the Muller organization. The need for the revolutionary transformation to produce new social formations with different characteristics, but still allowing aggregates, still enabling them, people finding their interests, again, defined by the characteristics of the new aggregate. The unconscious break is the second level, and the second level is the molecular organization of things. This is the revolutionary transformation we just talked about, which is about maintaining the productive process of desire itself rather than new stability. New stability ends up falling back in the same position we were just in. A little bit problematic, to say the least. By doing so and splitting them up again, the whole point here, they use the term, the driving role is the phrase. The driving role of desiring production, the position of its multiplicities. Really interesting way to put it. Desiring production is the active agent, right? It's the driving role. It isn't captured by organized forms in this case, this at the second level. It's a big deal as they're talking about it. And because of this, they go on, and we'll try to finish this paragraph so we can actually read something new this week. I know, you're shocked. It is understandable, therefore, that a group can be revolutionary from the standpoint of class interests and its preconscious investments, but not be so, and even remain fascist and police-like from the standpoint of libidinal investments. This is that two levels of analysis that they're bringing together. Political orgs that have absolutely a total understanding of class analysis and really are focused on the working class as a thing, or the poor, or whatever you want to say it, end up with that same reactionary libidinal investment, and as such, it reproduces fascist power relations. Despite pursuing revolutionary setups, the left knows more than a few of these. Just to be very clear, we know absolutely a few of these. There's a few examples of this. And I've gone over a few of them, but just pick a major leftist revolution in the last 100 years. That's kind of the thing. Like
18 Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, for example, Napoleon III, right? Like that's one of the example what Deleuze talking about in different repetition, right? On one of the recurrent examples, right? He accumulated all the classes of September the 10th, right? This Napoleon, this figure, right? Which kind of like what's happened when you have no unions, you have labor unions are break off, right? You have a situation where labor unions are unable to kind of mobilize, right? Mm-hmm. You come with a figure called Napoleon III, like say, hey, fuck the working class, fuck these working class, and let me form my own class, right? So,
well, it's one of those things. It's I upset people when I say this shit. One of the great leftist revolutions is Nazis. Like we know now that wasn't the case, but at the time, you can actually read stories. It's incredible in papers and like journals of people that as the Weimar Republic was falling apart, people would literally walk from like the Nazi rally to the communist rally or the socialist rally next door, and they saw them not as competing the way that we tend to now understand. Oh, it's the leftists and Trumpies. Like they saw them as kind of both being against the ruling class, both places where they were able to find their own interests in one way or another. There's a reason that they took a huge amount of talking points from the socialist groups, the Nazis did. And, it's I make the joke all the time that Identifying problems is not politics. Policies is politics. The guy goes into the bar and he sits down. A guy next to him goes, you know what? I had a farm. The bank seized my farm. And the guy goes, holy shit, that's awful. Should fucking kill all the bankers. He's like, yeah, we absolutely should. And you know what? On top of it, the mayor and everyone backed them up and worked with them. Fuck, we should get rid of everyone. Yeah, we should do that. It's like, yeah, and on top of it, you know who's really in charge is we should kill all the Jews. It's like, because everyone agrees what the problems are. We all agree the problems, but the solutions, that's a big question.
You know what else is funny? The whole fucking owning the libs thing has technically been a thing since Hitler, if you count the libs as anything left of Hitler. So, like, Hitler, fucking, I took left-wing words to annoy the left. Murray Rothbard in 1975, I took left-wing words to annoy the left.
Yeah, I mean,
old attitudes always come back, folks.
Well, again, because the whole point of the setup and all of these things is that they are working for people to find their interests politically. And also, by the way, the political infrastructure itself is what they're invested in, desires invested in, but they find themselves, their interests in these different political parties, even the people in it, even Hitler and Himmler and all these pieces of shit. They didn't go, okay, guys, okay, we've got 20 years. How do we do the worst thing ever? It's not really how people set out. The conditions and the material reality of what produced Hitler and everything. Like I like to say, if you killed Hitler as a baby, that's not stopping World War II. Someone else would have just taken his place, because the conditions that enabled Hitler, that's what you need to take care of. Like the excessive poverty and unemployment, and basically what we ended up doing to Germany post World War I. Again, they were naughty in World War I.
And before that, Brooks, the mass suppression of communist protesters when the Social Democrats kind of like, suppressed and the protesters, the communists, and they kind of institute a law of protection. Like anyone, I read the book, The Homo Sacer, and it delves to details how the Social Democrats created the laws that the Nazis used, the laws of state of exception, right? Anyone who's under the custody of the judge could, if he is in danger, right? For example, this law, especially in Weimar Republic, during the Social Democrat ruling, right? They instituted a law. Anyone under the custody of a court, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he caused a threat to the people, the German people or Weimar people, right? The state of exception applied to him. The state could detain him, could, do whatever it wants with him, right? So without kind of like, even if he's under the custody of a judge, right? So the Social Democrats created that, and after that, the Nazis played on the vagueness of these laws, right? And the distinction between the fact and the right, right? And they went outside the law, right? Outside the kind of into a realm of indistinction between the fact and the right, right? Between what the law says, what the fact is, and what the right is, right? And that's what's happened, right? That's, specifically what's happened. The fact that blame the Social Democrats for that.
Yep.
Also,
Well, so to continue though,
yeah.
Also,
I do want to push through.
Just all of what you just said, I just want to add, because I keep drawing it back to modern times. Shout out Biden.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Today is Mussolini's birthday, so I have to share one of my favorite tweets. Like, if Twitter was invented just for this moment, where Jim Carrey posted his drawing of the Mussolinis hanging upside down after being murdered, and the Mussolini's daughter seeing this and calling Jim Carrey a bastard, I'm not sure that the internet, I think everything else on the internet would be justified. It's one of my favorite things.
Mussolini is kind of one of the people who conquered like Libya. Like my grandpa lived in this time. He's dead now, but I think that he did a lot of slave labor, right?
Oh, no, Mussolini is a huge piece of shit. I just like that his daughter was really upset by Jim Carrey. That makes me happy. That's all.
Oh my god. That's kind
it's
of
in,
like...
It's in the chat. If you haven't seen it, Marcellus, it's in the chat. Take a look.
That's kind of like... I want to throw this joke, right? Do you remember the photo during the civil rights where a black, like the first lady who, like a black lady that like went to school, and a lot of white people like shouting at her, right? Do you remember that? Right?
Oh yeah, Arkansas.
Arkansas. Yeah, of course. One of these ladies are actually now still alive. So the one of the girls at that time that have been like one of the white girls at that time, right? And she's kind of like changed her politics and changed her tune and become like, it's kind of funny. Like you were shouting at this kind of black lady who entered the school, right, in Arkansas, and now you're kind of like change your politics. Like, this is fascinating, right? This is kind of
it's like, pretty normal. People are not that interesting. People do the same stuff kind of all the time. People may do what they do, but the social conditions which produce them and produce their actions, and again, desire as it flows through this, there's a reason that we find these things repeating or rhyming, I guess, as some people may say. That thing is actually pretty incredible, to be frank. But to continue, I do want to get through so we can get to the next paragraph, because we're still only repeating last week's reading. Last week's? Week before? Don't remember. To continue, because we're almost done. We're almost done. Truly revolutionary preconscious interests do not necessarily imply unconscious investments of the same nature. An apparatus of interest never takes the place of a machine of desire. Very particular here. Apparatuses of interest are representational. This is a regulatory, bureaucratic, administrative, these things that manage social relations. That's how we would talk about them now. These things operate only through representation, signification, and the organization of the subjectivities that sort of are within them or that share those interests. But the machine of desire is productive, connective, and creative, and it's always generating new. These things never take the place of in the French, it's slightly stronger language, as tends to be the case. Je ne veux pour. It never has the value of, never equivalent to. It's not really never takes the place of, because there's a lot of ways you can take that. But it never has the value. An apparatus of interest never has the same value as a machine of desire. An apparatus of interest can't do that same stuff. It never has the same value. The distinction is incredibly important to them because revolutionary politics necessitates machines of desire, not just apparatuses of interest. They go together, but they're not the same thing. And it's a big, big deal. This is just to pull Marx up for I've been deep in Marx. I did my video Monday on the dialectic and my brain. I've been working on that for too long. These last two videos I did literally have been working on for like 2.5 months, maybe 3 months. It's too much. My next videos are going to be like brain dead garbage. That'll feel nice. But anyway, machinery in Gundries for Marx is the same kind of thing. Marx's analysis of machinery doesn't play in the same distinction as most people consider. He wants us to reconsider what machinery or apparatus do. The apparatus being the structure of the thing versus the machinery, even though it's structured like a thing, it does those things. It's not the same stuff. This is, again, pulling towards Simondon, who did an amazing job with it, towards Deleuze. That's the deal. This is the abstract machine versus concrete arrangements that we'll come to see in their next book. That's the deal we're driving for. All right. Good Christ. Is everyone ready for actually having a new paragraph? Everyone ready? New paragraph? with all of this, I'm going to go get myself a water. Don't go anywhere. I need water. Oh my God.
Well, he's gone. We can gossip about Brooks. Let's do it.
Oh yes.
Get a lot of that guy. Like,
Yeah, get a lot of
jeez,
this
right?
guy. Yeah.
Like, come on, man. Like, did you see? Did you see that?
grift.
Come on. He should check himself.
What a
He's very
fucking
giant.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
I'm so sorry.
Back up.
I don't know if you guys are...
We were all calling you slurs while you were gone.
That's fair. I don't know if anyone's seeing YouTube chat. Apparently, Israel has bought a significant number of ads against my content, which is fucking hilarious. Steven
He's
is like,
Zionist.
it's the third, it's like the second, he's like, I am getting visit Israel ads again. It's the second time just in this stream. Look, I appreciate, don't, fuck Zionism. Fuck Zionism.
Yeah, fuck Zionism. Yeah.
Fuck Zionism.
Fuck this.
But also, what's the line? The capitalist will sell you the rope that you hang them with. So
The cloak.
Yeah.
Cloak.
yeah. Fuck Zionism.
No, Brooks. You don't get it. This is again Deleuze and Guattari being used by the IDF. It's
What can I say? I love the IDF myself.
Screw Arab Zionists.
Oh,
Screw
for fuck's sake.
Zionists, and screw these kind of people.
It is funny
Especially
though.
Arab Zionists.
It's maybe we should all visit Israel. That would go really well for us. They certainly aren't.
No, I don't want to pay any dime for any dime, any fucking dime.
If we all go to Israel, can we call it a field trip?
Yep. We will tell them we're there to teach about 1,000 plateaus. They would love it. Oh God. Oh
Getting
God.
into the West Bank.
I hate that I
Getting
said
into the
that because that's not even a joke. That's not even a joke. Like that probably could happen. Oh God. We're moving on. I can't.
Always sunny episode titles. The QC goes to Israel.
The QC
On an
solved the
episode.
Israel problem.
There's like there's the intro voice.
Harold and Kumar Goes to Israel was a pretty good film, though, to be fair. A revolutionary group. We're moving on. A revolutionary group at the pre-conscious level remains a subjugated group, even in seizing power, as long as this power itself refers to a form of force that continues to enslave and crush desiring production. The moment it is pre-consciously revolutionary, such a group already presents all the unconscious characteristics of a subjugated group. The subordination to a socius as a fixed support that attributes to itself the productive forces, extracting and absorbing the surplus value therefrom. The effusion of anti-production and death-carrying elements within the system which feels and pretends to be all the more immortal. The phenomena of group super-egoization, narcissism, and hierarchy. The mechanisms for the repression of desire. A subject group, on the contrary, is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. It causes desire to penetrate into the social field, subordinates the socius, or the form of power, to desiring production. Productive of desire, and a desire that produces, the subject group invents always mortal formations that exorcise the effusion in it of a death instinct. It opposes real coefficients of transversality to the symbolic determinations of subjugation, coefficients without a hierarchy or a group superego. What complicates everything, it is true, is that the same individuals can participate in both kinds of groups in diverse ways. Saint-Just or Lenin. Or the same group can present both characteristics at the same time in diverse situations that are nevertheless coexistent. A revolutionary group can already have reassumed the form of a subjugated group, yet be determined, under certain conditions, to continue to play the role of a subject group. One is continually passing from one type of group to the other. Subject groups are continually deriving from subjugated groups through the rupture of the latter. They mobilize desire and always cut its flux again further on, overcoming the limit, bringing the social machines back to the elementary forces of desire that form them. Just to read Jean-Pierre Fay at the end here on the group and its rupture or schiz. Quote, "What counts, what is effective in our opinion, is not such and such a group, but rather the dispersion or the diaspora produced by their splinterings." On the necessary polyvocal character of subject groups in the writing. That's the phrasing. It's rather the dispersion or the diaspora produced by their splinterings. The groups aren't the deal. Their splinterings are. Why would that be the case? Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about these groups. We have the first group, the preconscious. Remember the two setups. Remember the two sides of things. Is preconscious or unconscious. Two parts, two setups that are all the same thing, all desire, but it's different parts of that process. A revolutionary group at the preconscious level remains a subjugated group, even in seizing power, as long as this power itself refers to a form of force that continues to enslave and crush desiring production. This is why they hate traditional revolutionary politics. This is why I dislike them. I find the rest of this book, by the way, incredibly convincing, and also a lot of follow-on work that's come from this. Because even when a group gets political power, and we can talk about the Bolshevik revolution all the way through to, fucking January 6th. Who gives a shit? Fucking pick a group and pretend revolution or whatever. It has a revolutionary action, but it somehow remains subjugated, right? Because the way power itself is referring to itself, is referring to things, the way that power is actually exercised, actually reproduces the structures that oppress desire. The symbolic, the representational side of things, once again, control desire. Revolution is about obliterating this sort of status quo. And then some groups will just reform the status quo with some changes, new names, probably a new color, a really pretty new flag. But lo and behold, that's it. Because it's not really about who holds power. That's the red herring. It doesn't matter if it's Trump who holds power. Killing baby Hitler wouldn't have stopped World War II. It wouldn't have mattered. Now, there's small changes, sure. But China is a good example of this. It doesn't matter who holds power. What matters is the function of power itself, the nature of power itself as it goes. This is the preconscious revolutionary interest not automatically producing unconscious investments that are also revolutionary. The group may have the correct class analysis while maintaining fascist libidinal organization. Just reading from the previous paragraph we just finished. The moment it is preconsciously revolutionary, such a group already presents all the unconscious characteristics of a subjugated group. That moment, it doesn't matter. It's already done. Even if you have that proper thing, it still is this unconscious subjugation. The unconscious libidinal organization is contradicting it already. They continue. The subordination to a socius as a fixed support that attributes to itself the productive forces, extracting and absorbing the surplus value therefrom. The relationship that groups have to the socius, the social machine at large, capital in our case, instead of subordinating the socius to desiring production, the group is subordinated to this fixed support, the model of things, this established institutional form that ultimately does claim ownership of the productive capacities. For those of you who are super into Marx, just take how Marx basically shit on how capital, it doesn't matter how automated things get or anything, that always capital works and crushes labor. And as long as labor is crushed by capital, it doesn't matter. Now extend this to all of production as D&G are talking about. It's the same thing. It's the symbolic crushing desire, because it's fixed. It's the structure of things. We're still there. It's still playing in the same way. They even use the term surplus value. They even use the term surplus value because that's the point. The surplus value extraction in the economy, but now the libidinal economy. The creative energies of the group captured and channeled towards maintenance of the institutional structure rather than the production of new things, rather than enabling the emergent. Big deal. Big fucking deal, by the way. Kind of a huge super fucking deal. Notice that. There's a lot of semicolons here, so apologies, but I'm just going to be stopping at all of them. The effusion of anti-production and death-carrying elements within the system, which feels and pretends to be all the more immortal. Okay. If desire, as they've talked about it, is emergent and is constantly sort of connecting and doing stuff, there are places where there's sterility or limitations on the productive process. This is anti-production. Anti-production blocks or channels, sort of think of it as a neutral sort of production that forces around it, limiting productive processes, growing around it, the way that you can malform someone's foot by shoving it into a tiny shoe all of their life, or you can malform a tree by putting metal rods in the right place and having it grow around it over and over and over. This anti-production blocks. The death-carrying elements are the bureaucratic elements. The death-carrying is institutional preservation, the bureaucracy of things. These things stifle creativity as well. These things feel and pretend to be all the more immortal, and it's weird because, well, this seems counterintuitive, I think, if you say it the right way. The more that death-carrying elements infiltrate these organizational things and setups, the more the permanence and historical necessity appears. People don't like to talk about the real finite reality of our institutions. Even Trump and others, they laud them as like these really grand things. Even the liberals or pseudo left, whatever it may be, talk about the Constitution or the rule of law or the fucking
America
USA.
is more. United States of America is more democratic and more developed and more kind of like the usual thing that I hear from my teachers in Libya, right? Like it's more developed, more democratic, right? It's more kind of like which mean that we are better than you, right? Like this kind of attitude.
Well, it's sort of it's playing into another thing there. When we talk about Americans talk about America the same way a lot of people talk about their nationality, as if it's never going to stop, as if it has an infinite character to it. When the reality is, one, the idea of a national identity didn't really exist beyond like 200 years ago. Like not meaningfully in the way that we talk about it now, but certainly the way that we talk about any of these identities now didn't even exist 50 to 100 years ago. So there is a finite reality to all of these things, but the denial of those, the more that we spend time finding their necessity, necessity is a philosophical concept of presupposition of a thing. Things come to be the necessity. Spinoza, I used as an example of this, of logical necessity, where Spinoza makes a handful of statements in Ethics, and he opens with some very, very basic things, but the necessity of those statements, how they sort of then come together logically, builds his geometric method. He's very open about this, and it's actually one of the reasons I find his work really compelling. But that setup, the necessity of, well, look, what are we going to do without a police force? Is a great example. There was no police force like over 100 years ago. Not a thing. We didn't have police, not as we know them, certainly, but we didn't have close to the setup. Customs and Border Patrol didn't exist. It was like a handful of like people at Ellis Island. Like it's not the setup, but When we talk about them now, the presumption is the necessity and permanence of their historicity. There is a absolute move of narcissism built into this that is about the denial of the group's mortal, finite character. And that is the big deal of this sentence. Just this sentence. They then say, the phenomena of group superegoization, narcissism, and hierarchy, mechanisms of the repression of desire. We talked a little bit about the narcissism here, but superegoization is how groups... let's talk about the QC. A lot of people view the QC as Brooks. It's been an ongoing thing that there have been like infighting and lots of discussions about how to get away from that. This is Brooks's thing. I don't know what I do to build this. It doesn't really matter if I do. The structure and setup, the superegoization of the QC is almost as if it has its own personality. It's not really Brooks, but it's Brooks's thing, Brooks's setup. This group thing develops an internal authority structure that polices what thoughts and desires are enabled, what are repressed, and what are part of it. You've seen this. If you've gone and typed something or decided not to type something inside of the QC, you've experienced it directly. Now, some of it is intended. We explicitly talk about certain rules, things you can say, and we're kind of hard asses when it comes to that shit. But that thing is about conformity to the group. But we are not the only one that... Pick a group. Every group you are part of has this weird superegoization that comes with it. Because again, the group is about being invested in the narcissistic image of itself, its own historical importance, its own historical necessity, rather than any productive activity. That's not really what we end up doing. That's not the setup here. And again, hierarchy, the verticality of it that organizes everything, separating leadership or influencers or those who are in charge versus everyone else. That thing, leaders from members, thinkers from doers, managers from labor, representatives from represented. Pick a group. Again, these things sort of outlay themselves into it. These are subjugated groups. And yes, I'm saying the QC is that. That's fine. I don't care. Because that's not the point. It's not about building only subject groups. These things are subjugated groups necessarily. But a subject group, on the contrary, is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. It is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. This is a different way to consider how groups can be organized. Again, when we talk about representation or desire taking the lead or one subjugating the other, they don't really balance out. We can talk about why another time, and it might be worth dealing with at some point, but they don't really like, oh, you're going to have them equal. No, it's the process of them sort of one tosses the other, one builds on the other. It's tough that way. When we have this other way of thinking about group organizations where people have groups not defined necessarily by political goals or what we might call an ideology or shared sort of direction, but instead the libidinal organization of the people, their unconscious investments are directly revolutionary. They say it causes desire to penetrate the social field, subordinates the socius or the form of power to desiring production. Subject groups, unlike subjugated, reverse the relationship here between, as they say, desire and social organization, social field. It causes desire to penetrate it. It's not about containing desire in private, familial, or individual spheres, or my own self, or making sure I properly sublimate that desire into something else, whatever the fuck that could be. No, it's subject groups actually make desire directly social and political. Pop, that's it. Right there, immediately. Productive of desire and a desire that produces, the subject group invents always mortal formations. Invents. Wait, is it invents? I don't think it's invents. Is it invents? 1 second. Sorry, I'm going to look. This PDF pisses me off sometime. 2 seconds, sorry. Looking at the French. Invents. Yeah, it's invents. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, productive of desire and desire that produces. Subject group invents always mortal formations that exercise the effusion in it of a death instinct. Subject groups are creative. They're creative. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, of course.
Subject groups who do not have an aim. If we have an aim, if I'm going to go, hey, you're joining my group, and here's what we're doing, and Elderon's there, and Elderon's like, yeah, fucking, do you understand? Brooks wants you to do that. Go do that. And then someone else like, yeah, here, Elderon, the fuck, man, you're not doing that. This is crushing you, not just you, the desire that's producing you. It's forming you in particular ways. Subject groups don't really have that goal as a thing, right? Instead, we're talking about something very different, something that is continuously creative, because there's this really weird way desire and production deal with each other. They say always mortal formations, which is really great to talk about. The language here, it sounds weird, but take a second and realize it. If you're being told the immortality of what you're doing, or how you're investing, or what you're doing is for God, for your nation, for justice, for all this shit, that shit lives forever, and it has a model that you have no idea. It's no, build something that's going to die. Subject groups build things that die. That's what they mean by always mortal formations. So it's unlike the subjugated group. Subjugated groups are about institutional immortality, the necessity of it, the eternality of it. No, fuck that. Subject groups are about temporary, finite forms that you don't give a fuck if you toss them aside because they no longer are serving a purpose. Well, that sucks. Bye. Because it's not. Things are built to die. Enable that. Enable these processes to live and die. They say they exercise the effusion in it of a death instinct. Complicated language here. It is basically in the French the same way. This mortal character, the mortal characterization of things, prevents accumulation of these anti-productive elements by accepting death, by accepting that things end, by enabling the Nietzschean forgetting, which is one of the things that I think most people don't understand Nietzsche's really kind of fucking super big on. By allowing things to end, you have actually enabled the space for new. If everything always lived, if everything was always immortal, there would be nothing. It would just pile of pile of pile of pile. That we die enables the new. The one saving grace of time is that old fucks die so new fucks can step in. Sometimes they take on too long and they won't ever let go. But everyone dies. Everything should die. Everything should. They continue. Subject groups. It opposes real coefficients of transversality to the symbolic determinations of subjugation, coefficients without a hierarchy or a group superego. Transversality is Guattari. If you haven't read Transversality, it's an extraordinary collection of essays. This is Guattari screaming through Deleuze right here. If you didn't know, Deleuze wrote all this. Guattari sent a bunch of notes to Deleuze. But this is him screaming through it. This is the thing that the real coefficients of transversality are opposed to symbolic determinations of subjugation. So real coefficients of transversality are like the actual connections and communications that cut across what you would say are established hierarchies or institutional boundaries. My favorite example of transversality that Guattari uses is probably his simplest. He talks about, he was a big dude at this clinic, and he spent a lot of time with it. One of the things he noticed at a particular clinic is that somehow there was a lot of really good work taking place, and doctors were very aware of what was happening with patients in a way that he sort of hadn't experienced. And he was talking, he interviewed, he talked to, found out that basically it's because the nurses and doctors were all fucking. Like, all the time. It's not that they were fucking, but in the process of that, they'd talk about their day. So that their socialization across hierarchies, the breaking of that hierarchical thing where nurses and doctors would fuck, and then they'd go, oh, God, yes, I needed that. I've been dealing with Mr. Johnson all day. He has had he's been crying and screaming about snakes all day. I don't know, fucking whatever. But the doctor would go, oh, really? The awareness of what was happening, that shift, that actual connection and communication cutting across the established institutional boundaries, the real coefficient has actual effects. It's not a representation of an existing relationship. This is not, oh yes, well, because they were lovers. No, it's because they were fucking, and when they fucked, they talked. That this is transversality, is that. The actual connections, not just this story of what the connection is, the actual connections happening. Yes, MASH as a television show is about transversality. Correct. Yes. It's not just that. I talked about Boston Legal yesterday. Extremely so. In fact, some of the biggest moments on that show are about where, younger people or other people are having the cross-reference across hierarchies. Because in hierarchies, we know the relationship. Oh, all the managers get together. They talk about manager shit, whatever. All of the workers get together. They talk about worker shit. Transversality is not, yes, but managers manage workers. No, that's the representational thing. The actual real coefficient of transversality is the actual produced effects rather than the representation of those relationships. This is juxtaposed directly against the symbolic determinations of subjugation. Now, this is the representational relationship I was talking about, the fixed identity that maintains separation, that prevents communication or enforces it in particular ways. A nurse reports to a doctor. That's a relationship. That is the subjugation of that. Because a nurse and a doctor will, yes, nurse, tell me these 12 things. Okay, that's it. Nurse, what else is important? What's important? They aren't just bitching about their day. Doctors don't know what they need to know, so they don't know what to ask. Nurses don't know what the doctor needs to know. But the established relationship enforces very particular types of communication. That back and forth is what they're talking about. This is coefficients without a hierarchy, without a group superego. This is a horizontality of this rather than a verticality. This is about direct one-to-one relationships or even one-to-many, doesn't matter, but direct rather than mediated. Mediated is the problem. Mediated is the problem. Yet another reason that Michael Burns video pissed me off when he said what we need to do is be more mediated. Fuck you! God damn fucking rash right-wing nutcases everywhere. I'll stop for a second and let people talk for a second. If anyone has a thing.
When you talked about the example of the nurse and the transversality, right?
Yes.
To the symbolic determination of subjugated coefficient, right? Is that it's not within the representation is in itself epiphenomenal to go to different repetition. It's not like the thing, right? It's not like a general, if you're let's say, for example, in the military, for example, right? It's not kind of like the general is the kind of the order, be all, end all, right? Of the kind of the entire process, right? And you have to have a kind of feedback,
by the way, no, specifically a hierarchized relationship is very particular, and it's mediated and controlled. And the point is that relationship is something that is naturally not only abstract, but something that is determined by the group. For example, and actually, I think let's talk about Trump's organization as a thing, because I think, again, there's a lot of fodder for these conversations right now, a lot of it. Trump and the people around him are like in his, I'm going to say his royal giant, ball. They know how to deal with him one-to-one. That thing that he's done, that he has created, I'm the boss, you report to me. He turns people against each other. He's talked about this. He's a fucking lunatic. But what's happened is by creating that vertical hierarchy relationship, everyone has relationships, but they're mediated by that. They are naturally subjugated because desire pathways just want to connect. They just want to do their thing, but now they can't. Now it's like, okay, nope, they hit you could say it hits a wall of representation. It's like, nope, not like that, not like that. Versus a more open-ended type relationship where that thing may exist, but it isn't about that anymore. That thing, that symbolic determination of subjugation, this representational relationship about fixed identities and separations that are maintained. This is the thing of subjugated groups. The elimination of that is not to just say we don't have that. We're all going to have that. They say in this paragraph, we're continually passing from one group to another. We're part of this group, we're not part of that. This is, by the way, how identity politics operates, like the negative side of it. Because again, identity politics is reactionary, but it's saying I am part of this subjugated group, and I am seeing myself as such. The difference between this, practically, when it comes to like actual politics, is are you actually out there trying to change things, or are you out there talking about changing things? This is, to me, where the line is easiest, because when you're actually out there trying to stop poverty, you will learn that actually the transversality of relationships, I will end up having great times with a hard right-wing, super religious, evangelical Trump supporter at a soup kitchen. I will, because they're there doing that work, and so am I. And if we're not caring about, well, what group are you in? I'm with the People Judean Front. Oh, no, we're with the Judean People's Front. People's Front of Judea are a bunch of assholes. That type of mentality, this is the challenge. Otherwise, when you're just doing stuff, that actual connection, that transversality, that is how you move beyond subjugation.
Wait, Brooks, I think this is a really great way to chime in when you say go beyond, the transfers, or whatever the people actually interact with. So, Catherine Liu, the person that wrote the book,
Managerial Class, bitch. Yeah.
So, okay. So, first
sorry,
of all,
I shouldn't say that, but I'm letting you know I don't care for her.
Okay. I do not disagree with you. It's fine, right? Because they are kind of, these people belong to
yes.
Plus, they're critiquing other people without offering anything that even remotely resembles the transversality that might emerge out of this part. But they do heavily critique on the part where they said that the virtual signaling, the virtual hoarding, it's deeply, deeply reactionary. And it is working with the capital, right? So I just want to say, they are critiquing a deconstructionist, but it does not mean that they have no problem with whatever these reactionary things.
Well, and we'll talk about the reason I say going beyond, because let's talk about it in terms of another way to say it would be subjugated groups is sort of seen as these eternal things. They're the immortal groups. But let's talk about groups that pop up and die. And a great one, I'm going to use the example of the soup kitchen again. If you haven't been, if you go right now to soup kitchen or food pantry, whatever, you are going to be surrounded by Trumpers who are hard right-wing Christians, for the most part, in America. Just letting you know. And it's weird.
Okay, are you sure that's the same in California, though?
Yes, it was true in Los Angeles, and it was true in San Francisco.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, people who are liberals or on the left don't go to those things. They go to DSA meetings and talk about how smart they are.
Also, don't trust the fucking the blue reputation of California. I had a friend of me once describe it as like a red state masquerading as a blue state. Like the city areas are very blue, but the suburbs in Cali are very right wing, and the
It's
poor
not far off.
areas.
But here's the thing.
very-
But here's the underlying thing. The underlying thing here is, I go, and when I go and I'm working and we're cooking up, we're serving food. What's actually happened is we've created a subject group. We are in that moment doing the thing that we're going to do for the next hour or two. We're working together on it. We're talking, generally speaking, having really oddly enlightening conversations for both sides. Well, because it's not like I hide who I am. They certainly don't. They're fucking nuts like that. But at the end of the day, that group dies. It does. I don't like stay part of the soup kitchen mafia or some shit. That group dies and goes away. In fact, most of the time we're joining groups that die, and we're going back to groups or seeing ourselves as part of groups that are immortal, that never die, that are this large scale immortality. This is the movement of how we experience things. We're in these groups, and then there's no name. We don't even give a name to the group. It dies. And then we go about our day and we join those other things that are the larger scale. This is the back and forth. This is the back and forth. This is the back and forth they're talking about. And that's the point. They say what complicates everything, it is true, is that the same individuals can participate in both kinds of groups in diverse ways. So they use Saint Just and Lenin. These are people who are hardline revolutionary figures, like genuinely. They're big names, all of that, but they absolutely did revolutionary subjugation as they did. For Saint Just, French Revolution, big deal about virtue and these immortal ideas, right? Revolutionary terror, I believe, was a big one for Just.
The idea about people sovereignty and the people sovereignty and this kind of representation of the people.
Well, and again, genuine revolutionary desire. I would not take that from them, but also really reactionary, like moral authoritarianism. And Lenin's not wildly different than that, because again, revolutionary organizational methods to achieve, and then also bureaucratic apparatus that ultimately became Stalinism and kind of supplanted himself. So weird, but that's the point that they're talking about. And again, to say, they continue, or the same group can present both characteristics at the same time in diverse situations that are nevertheless coexistent. A group can be subjugated and subject group. It's deeply contingent, right? What it's doing, how it's doing it, how it's setting up. These things can coexist in a single organization. I am hoping to get the QC there at some point, because that would be really interesting. But it's tough, because how do you do it? How do you set it up? How do you do these things? It's a nightmare. But this is the point. The two modes can even exist at the same time. They can go together, because again, it's contingency, the little death versus the big immortality, almost. That continuous thing that they're talking about. They continue. A revolutionary group can already have reassumed the form of subjugated group, yet be determined under certain conditions to continue to play the role of subject group. So you can switch. It can be the same group, but in different conditions. It can switch. A group can be industrialized, institutionalized, bureaucratized, but also have within it the capacity for subject group, small things of little death under certain conditions. That's it. They say reassume the form. A revolutionary group can already have reassumed the form of a subjugated group, because they're talking about the going back to earlier states. It's not really a simple development. It's reassuming. Revolutionary groups reverting to familiar organizational patterns is basically how this works. Like, that's kind of constant and continuous, and kind of the whole point that they're going through as they're talking about it. And one is continuously passing from one type of group to the other. There's dynamism to this. You're not stuck in one group. You're not even probably aware which group you're in. And again, you can be in one group or the other in the same group. Like, that's not the point. The whole point is about the directions of movement, the directions of repression. It's not about fixed categories for them in any capacity. And that's this last line that they talk about. Go ahead.
It's not about the idea of like what the classical Marxists said, false necessity, right? An old world, false necessity, right? Or kind of like the idea of like, it's kind of like they're removing this idea of false necessity, as Marx said, right? Which is kind of like, you could be in subjugated group, right? And at the same time in subject group, right? They remove this idea of you can be in bourgeois class, like in the bourgeois class, which is a subjugated group, right? But at the same time, you can be in the subject group. You can be the most bourgeois, money-owning, I don't know what the word.
Well, no, I'm actually going to use an example that Arclight brought up in YouTube, because I think it's a perfect example of what they're talking about and how capitalism co-opts it. Corporations, once upon a time, if you didn't know, Wyoming invented them, sort of. It's a long story. But corporations, as we know them today, when they first started, were intended to be legal ways that a person would get together with a few other people, do some stuff, and then stop. Corporations were not really meant to outlive people. They certainly weren't even meant to, I think, last years. Like, years is kind of like, because the whole point was a person had the legal right to do a bunch of stuff and they would control stuff. And that was the way corporations were born out of this idea of like, well, instead of a person having to spend their whole life, what if we got together, all of us shared stuff, we did it quickly and then destroyed it? So it actually, corporations began as an almost idea of a legalized, bureaucratized subject group that, of course, because the nature of bureaucracy is to become immortal and to find itself like a necessity, we now exist in a time where corporations never really go away. They sort of just stop working, but then they're forever functional in their own fucked up way. This is a great example of this, which is weird, but it's accurate. Wig, there were royal charters first. Wyoming has a very interesting history with corporations, LLCs, C Corps, S Corps, and the legal organization of them. Very interesting stuff. Worth looking up. But yes, there were royal charters. Different thing. That was a different thing than corporations as we know them, as I was talking about them just now. But again, the last bit they say here. Subject groups are continually deriving from subjugated groups through a rupture of the latter. They mobilize desire, always cut its flux, again, further on, overcoming the limit, bringing the social machines back to the elementary forces of desire that form them. The genesis of subject groups exist, and it's the footnote covers this. The rupture of subjugated groups creates them. The moments of breakthrough where people go, this is fuck this, and I'm going to create my own fucking moon with theme parks and hookers and blackjack, and it's like off they go. They're doing their thing. Subject groups activate an organized desire for creative purposes. That's what they do. They mobilize desire. They do this all the time. And so, again, subject groups inside of subjugated groups are constantly finding themselves doing this. That mobilization of desire cuts the flux of desire. It cuts it, but connects it, reconnects it, building things, setting it up that in ways that are within this, as they say, overcoming the limit. They break through the boundaries. They allow the cutting and the connecting instead of stability in fixed patterns, which is the subjugated groups. They return social organization and relationships in desiring production itself. They bring it back rather than building institutions and respecting institutional limits. That's the point. The whole thing here is that revolutionary politics is about attending to libidinal organizations of groups, not just political goals. And out of those political goals in subjugated groups, we find the groups that are actually able to become revolutionary. So there's kind of a constant process that's happening here. There you go.
Hi, Brock.
Well, hello. And who's this?
Hi, may I talk?
Oh, Afnan, of course. Have fun.
Thank you very much. I just have something that, I'm sorry, first of all, my vocabulary is a little bit off. I've only started speaking English 2 years ago. And I've read Guattari's and Deleuze, of course, and others in a different language. So don't mind my terminology about them.
No,
but
of course.
the way you speak about identity politics just right now, and about like, especially, it did a little bit give me a glimpse of Habermas's communicative action. Like the idea of having the ability to transform whatever ideologies you have into an imminent surface that others can join or relate to. And I don't know if you get exactly what I'm trying to say over there.
It's been a bit since I touched Habermas. It's been a bit, but can you expand some of the language just so I can maybe it helps me to have a little bit more language around it so I know my brain can hook onto something, because it's not hooking quite yet.
All right, sorry. Basically, all right, thank you. So Habermas, the communicative action theory or whatever, despite all the differences between him and Deleuze and, of course, and whatever postmodernism.
There's a ton. Of course, there's a ton of difference.
Yeah, there's a ton. There's a ton of a difference. Of course, fundamentally it is, especially in terms of how they react both into the institutions or modernity itself. But when we're talking about Habermas' idea of communicative action, he is trying to say that there is an imminent ground or surface that is, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing it well, that is not exactly, it's not subjective, it's always intersubjective, it's between two, it's like the between at Heidegger's or Novalis, or even Fichte, or Fichte, if you would pronounce it, this place where we both can have our own ideas, like not, of course, as individuals, but rather as groups, that especially in identity politics, where you would be able to transform your ideology into a language in the public sphere where others can relate to and be part of.
This would be where I think there would be a pretty, again, it's been a while. It feels like this is where we would see a really significant divergence. For what I remember of Habermas, his big play is very focused on this idea of shared normativity of a group, like people being aware of what their groups are doing and a shared goal that's very necessary to it, that there is an ethics or an understanding that everyone shares. For DNG, like literally that version of this is the subjugated group.
Yeah, of course, I understand that, but like that's the thing, because when you talked about identity politics, I can't see identity politics being part of DNG's theory, because just the idea of geo-philosophy or like geographic philosophy or the rhizome and the becoming itself, identity politics does not relate to that, and identity politics is only associated to me.
It does.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it's
exactly, that's why I asked.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm understanding now. So, okay. Identity politics, let's step back. For both Deleuze and Guattari, they're not idealists in the sense that, we just need to get rid of identity politics. That's not a true thing. That's not, no. Anything that exists that is part of that social representational space or ideological space or whatever we call it, all these things, this is also desire. This is also material. This is also everything. So as we have identity politics, it is repressive, but it's not repressive in the way that I think most people tend to talk about it, where it's, fuck identity politics because we're going to help my group and not another. It's like, no. Identity politics is dangerous because it removes the universality of experience, and it eliminates the ability for us to understand that actually the subjectivity that we have been assigned, or the goals we've been assigned based on these pre-conscious identity-based interests, are actually not the interests of desire, but instead the representational space that we've been told about. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or that it's not true. True or false doesn't really apply for DNG. Instead, it's a thing we have to understand we must tarry with, we must deal with as we build new interests. Because for them, as we talk, let's say we figure out what is going to destroy capitalism. Whatever that system is, needs to be able to better handle desire and give interest and investment space that's satisfying to desire, and it has to beat identity politics. Like, it's got to beat identity politics for it to be effective. Now, it doesn't mean identity politics isn't a thing. It absolutely is. I can say that I'm a white guy right now and everyone has a visceral reaction in one way or another. That setup is what they're talking about here. Whereas I think for Habermas, it's much more about attaching to those things and rationally understanding where our position is, or what my actual class position is, or where I'm at socially, or like Frederick Jameson building cognitive maps about, oh, I'm placing myself socially so I understand where I'm at. Their whole thing is like, no, fuck all that. We need to understand the opposite, that those maps are determined and set up by this entire process and desiring production before it is even formed. By saying I want to figure out what's going on with the white man. Well, there you go. You've done it. You've created the space within which desire is able to build the rest of that. You've conditioned your own answer by building the question in a certain way. And the same would be true of all of our political action, because the subjugated group, it doesn't matter how revolutionary you may be. It doesn't matter what your claims are. There is an investment that's happening within that, in the group, in the maintenance of the group, in the idea of the group, the rules of the group, whatever it is. There's something that in the Nietzschean sense of the, again, Klosowski's, hey, we're going to be doing an upcoming reading of Klosowski's Vicious Circle, where he talks about Nietzsche and the eternal return. Please join that. But the way Klosowski talks about it through Nietzsche, we go through the process of experience to model, and the oscillation of that is the oscillation that they're speaking of here. They're bringing it to political action, which Klosowski doesn't drive all the way to, but they're saying, we have the model of things and we're aware of it. And when we step out, if we're not aware of the model of things, if we're not aware of how desire and will, and Nietzsche's will, is being malformed or directed towards the model, or how the model is being kept up in bureaucracy or autocracy or any of these other things, the fascizing paranoiac tendency of the model, if we're not aware of that, we just continue to oscillate stuck within subjugation. But anytime there's a rupture in this model, and it happens a lot, people who are going to be listening to me right now are probably like, Brooks is so fucking awesome. I think he's great. And then tomorrow they might go, fuck that guy. Brooks sucks. What the fuck are we doing listening to him? That break is an opportunity for someone to form a subject group, to grab other people who also say fuck Brooks, but then they will go and they will create a subjugated group because they will have their own rules, their own setup, and their own thing. And for Deleuze and Guattari, this process of break is effectively what Capital's doing as well, with codes and everything else. But this system is where we can start finding, hey, this is because we have these representational qualities. Habermas was super attached to representation and logic and rationality, but these things actually take desire, the libidinal force, the will, the force of things, and it crushes it into the shape of whatever it needs. It traps it, it holds it, it represses. And instead, we need to understand that desire needs to be able to be in control of representation, which is a completely different way of considering all of this. So it's allowing representation, because we're not going to get rid of it. I have to use words. We've got art. I'm okay with all of these things. It can be lovely. But is it that art, those words, that book, that video game are determined or determinate or descriptive? Are they enabling? Are they the type of game that is built, pre-built and pre-set up for me, where the roles aren't random, where there isn't any change, where there's no room for me to explore and allow the emergence of behavior to exist? Or is it actually quite the opposite, where the space of emergence is massive and it's enabling people to go absolutely wild? This is the political sphere that they're playing in. Sorry for the long ramble back.
No, actually, yeah, okay. Exactly. That's but like, okay. So, if I may,
please,
just add one more thing about identity politics, especially if, like, yeah. So what you said is it's what I understand from Deleuze, but in some sense I do differentiate Deleuze a little bit, especially with, like, because okay. Like, for example, if we take gender identity for Foucault, okay, for Foucault, so, like, if we take gender identity, then there is this that always lays behind the identity or gender or sexuality for Foucault, which is always the a pleasure principle, where only gender are there to oppress the like it always it like gender is there to oppress sexuality. It doesn't celebrate sexuality. It's rather oppressing it always through the gender. Of course, we know Butler's theory over that, which I'm not going to get into it, but it's important that for like the problem with Foucault, at least from Deleuze's perspective, as I understand it, it's that he had this something beneath sexuality, which is the pleasure, or beneath building sexuality or genders, which is the principle of pleasure. But I think Foucault did understand that there is always rupture in the pleasure. That's why when we talk about, for example, transgender, it's the transgender is the rupture itself for Foucault, if I understand it.
So I would say, so two things. First off, I used to pronounce Foucault like you. I'm just going to mention it's Foucault like ho.
Yeah, Foucault.
Yeah. Just I used to do the same thing. So just everyone learns how to pronounce everything at some point. I
read him in a different language, so
I know. I'm just letting you know, just in case. Like ho, yes, correct. Like ho. Fucko is the other. That's my joke name for him is Fucko, which also sounds correct depending on how you say it. Okay. Foucault. Overall, as you mentioned, yes, there's issues between him and Deleuze. One of Foucault's big deals is that he does have lack as the core of things. So for him, the split or the negation of the thing is where we find the new. For Deleuze, it's not a split in the same sense. It's a break, a productive break, the way that an engine or actually, I would say the way a computer chip works. Computer chips operate on breaks of electricity. The rate of electricity coming in, it's turned on and off, literal breaks. That thing that's happening is a break, but it's an affirming break. It's not a negation. It's an affirmation. This affirmation means that as this desire is building out and it's building sort of its own trap as it builds representation, the gender that's built and originally done through being codified in the Earth Socius, these things over time hit the point where we are in capital, where things are breaking down into their tiniest little pieces. That shift as we're making our way around means that gender doesn't really have the same meaning or stability or even internal anything, that there is nothing to it except the pure emergence of desire that is invested in the old representational stories or invested in the change of those things and is shifting them. Generally speaking, it is a combination of those that then emerges as a person who says that they are, man, woman, trans, xenogender, it, they, whatever. But this thing emerges from that combination. It is a purely affirming move for Deleuze. There is no negation in Deleuze's work.
Yeah.
I hope I'm understanding what you're saying. I'm sorry if I'm off topic. I'm trying to.
No, actually, you're not at all. If anything, it's just I think that I'm a little bit lacking the vocabularies that I can use for philosophy, because I've been always reading it in different language for many years. That I've only started. That's why actually I joined and I found you to learn philosophy in English. Thank you. But yeah, so I do understand that. Of course, desire does go against whatever Foucault think about. Foucault. So whatever Foucault thinks about, of course, desire is always against it in terms of pleasure, because pleasure is always about lacking something through Freud.
For Foucault, yes.
Whatever we have. Yes, for Foucault, I mean.
And he famously, despite writing the worst intro for a book that ruins a book for Anti-Oedipus and saying how glowing it is and it's the future and this will be known as the decade of Anti-Oedipus or the decade of Deleuze or the century of Anti-Oedipus, he then privately went on to say that he fucking hated the book and he could never get his head around it. It's like, okay, dude, thanks, great.
I mean, Foucault has many problems. But
yeah,
of course. But then from whatever you said just right now, it takes us a step back to something that we discussed, that you talked about 2 paragraphs ago, but I didn't want to intervene because, again, I actually didn't know how to say it. Because like, when we're talking about machines, between Lacan and Guattari, because Guattari, when he started his, before even meeting Deleuze, he started more of being against Lacan, writing against whatever Lacan's writing, especially if you read, like, for example, his trilogy. I think it will be in English, the trilogy with Daniel Selfdon, I think. Anyway, regardless, so I do find that Lacan, if we ignore the lack, if we ignore that Lacan is more of having a lack as something that cannot ever be filled or desire. But for machine, Lacan does mention in one of his seminars that he had, which is actually the symbolic seminar. It's just 1 year after having the imaginary seminar, and it was after he met Strauss, Levi Strauss, I think that's how you pronounce it. He did talk about the machine, and especially talking about the machine from this perspective that does very much relate to DNG works, because when he talked about machine, he talked about if the way he differentiates humans from animals, of course this differentiation is not accurate, but it's an example that he gave, it's through machines. So he said that machines are free, and like the reason why machine is free is because exactly they have this kind of relation building that it just keeps flowing outside itself. And he exactly said the example of like having a cup of water that just keeps, like floating water from inside the cup and keeps going outside.
Well, and just to mention, the stuff you're talking about is the stuff Guattari, who was a student of Lacan, and I think one of his better ones. That's the stuff that he took and ran with, because
yes,
what Guattari does with Lacan is extraordinary, and it's very much exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, but sorry, back to the idea itself, which is now for Lacan, and if we ignore the lack, and we still see the machine that Lacan had through the symbolic, if we ignore also that we're never able to reach the real and what you explained, it's still that it's still, to me, I can't relate, of course, identity politics or identity at all. Like you talked about, for example, identity for you, like as a citizen of the US, as someone, national identity, or the nation state, and started like the revolution. Regardless, I can't see that this rupture is something that happens between now and then, whenever we have an identity. That, okay, there is an identity over here, there is this group where they have an identity, then a rupture would happen, then suddenly something else will emerge out of it. It's always going through rupture. So there isn't exactly an identity. There isn't exactly something.
That's probably a better way to put it, yes. But we do, but so I would say with an edge, that's probably a better way to talk about it, but we do talk about the thing that is the model of the thing. So it isn't that I'm always an American, that American is like a stable thing, but the symbol of it seems to go across moments, seems to be something that I can emotionally be invested in one moment and have an emotional response to another that overlaps time, and that seems to exist in this infinite forever space. This is the identity politics of that I find dangerous. This is the immortal that they were just talking about with the subjugated groups. The need to, and again, why these identities, despite not being at all real, I don't know if you watched the, I hate Jubilee now. I'll never watch it again, but the last one they did, which broke me, was the guy who said that white people are Native Americans, which is awesome. Like, as far as like shit people say, it's exactly the point. there is no such stable thing as what any of this actually means, because all of it is so deeply contingent and set up. But there is two ways to handle it. One is the emergent nature of identity, where as I'm doing stuff, I feel a certain way, or I consume a certain way, or I look a certain way, or whatever it is. The other is the subjugation to the representational space, where whatever I'm going for, whatever needs to be kept in that thing for me to have consistency, for me to have ongoing sameness and the paranoid reaction, even though it's not the same, the symbol is. And as such, the symbol, which stretches across things in time, the same way I could talk about American is a thing that's been around for like 200 years. Multiple years beyond that, they used to talk about Americans as being people who went to the Americas. 400 years ago, 500 years ago, they called them Americans back then. But it didn't mean the same thing. But the name sets across and has this long standing and has emotions added to it. And this is the back and forth they're talking about. This is when Nietzsche talks about the eternal return, the movement from model of a thing to actual experience, the way memory operates in Bergson. All of these things come back to that same thing, the way that representation either subjugates desire or desire subjugates representation. We don't have one desire doing that yet, but we definitely have the other one. Well, after that, any time, thank you, by the way, for another couple bucks. I'll never turn it down. But absolutely, anyone here will tell you, I can talk about this shit literally forever, and it's a problem. I'll go on for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it's a problem for most people. It's very, very frustrating. But if you didn't see, the fucking guy going, whites are Native Americans, is one of the most amazing, because he's a Catholic Italian, which is so fucking incredible, because in my lifetime, Italians weren't considered and then are, and then also aren't considered white. Literally 15 years ago, they weren't. Italian Americans were still considered something else. So for him to say he's white and now also indigenous is so fucking crazy, but it is that power of that. It is awesome in the sense of being filled with awe. I am filled with awe. It isn't good as in the 1980s version of awesome. It's not that. It's what the fuck, dude? You are doing the thing that I tell people that fascists do, but you're doing it for me. So thanks. Didn't know you were going to oblige me so well.
I mean, some subjugated group vote Muslims for Michigan, vote for Trump, they vote for him, while there's Muslims in the Middle East who are kind of getting killed in Palestine, they vote for him. It's normal.
But again, why? This is, but what it comes down to is, again, the same things. And again, this is why I say this book or the ideas behind it. And again, people have taken it further. But the question is, where do people see their political interests? I will tell you right now, people will always vote for where they see their interest. They will get up out of their fucking chairs and vote for their interest. If they don't see their interest, they won't vote. And there's a line and a gradient there where I voted for Kamala, I voted for Biden, I voted for Hillary, I voted for Obama, because those were my interests. We're talking about a minor amount. But someone who's a Muslim, a Palestinian refugee Muslim in Michigan, and it's a huge Muslim Arab community there, huge. If you haven't been to Dearborn, it's crazy. They internally have discussions about this, and they look out and they go, what the fuck? Why, this isn't my interest. He's saying he's not going to kill my people. It doesn't matter what lies there are. Their interests are served. Their interests are found.
And there's also a huge sort of phenomena of cis gay people who usually turn against transgenders. They even support the Republican Party and its efforts to crack down on transgender rights. And it's despite the fact that gay marriage is only recently, it's only been a decade since it's been legalized in the United States. So it's quite astonishing. But I do think what we're discussing in this book, it really explains that in a clear way, I think.
Excellent. It's a hell of a thing, the way that they write about this. It's a lot of stuff. Spog, I have no idea what those things fucking mean. I have no idea what any of that shit is. I don't even know what... It's just made me feel very old. What online ideas... I'm not going to repeat the words because I don't know if I'll get banned for them because some new slur put up. I have no fucking idea what anything is. Underlying this, we'll just to continue talking about the text because I think it's worthwhile, just at this last little bit. A revolutionary group can already have reassumed the form of a subjugated group, yet be determined under certain conditions to continue to play the role of a subject group. When we talk about groups in general, or how we interface with them, or what the online left means, one, there's no such thing. But when we talk even more specifically about the DSA, or we talk about BLM, or we talk about blah, 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 who gives a fuck? Pick a fucking group. It doesn't even matter. Like any of these things, how do you deal with the fact that, like we were just talking about, there's no stability in them either? That groups are almost themselves semi-meaningless as a thing. There's an adherence, a general social cohesion, a model of what that group is. Yes. But they can, a subject group can reassume, after revolution, reassume that, and then also continue to play the role of subject group. The weird things of this, Napster. Let's talk about Napster. Napster actually had a very interesting, story and genealogy. Originally built, as it was, to just simply share piracy music. It wasn't really built originally to make music. It was literally built to steal it. And after lawsuits and all of the other things that ultimately destroyed the company and capital was able to take hold, it didn't get rid of the founder or the people who built the hacking shit. In fact, it held them up and put them in a position of continuing to do things and empowering them to do stuff that they would then co-opt. As a revolutionary group can have a reassume the form of subjugated group, yet be determined under certain conditions to continue to play the role of a subject group. Jesus Christ. When you're having a conversation about a group, wrong way. Are we talking about subject or subjugated groups? And within that, are we talking about how desire is playing within them, how they're emergently growing? Or are we talking about the representational status of these things and how, the predetermined relationships, the predetermined ways people deal with each other, the predetermined setups across the board? If that's what we're doing, we're not actually dealing with revolution or change in any meaningful sense. I would even argue, we're not even dealing with minor changes or electoralism. At that point, we're talking about just keeping the same shit going. The maintenance of the gigantic model. I feel like pulling out Klosowski every fucking time. Yeah, I'm just going to read. We're going to do a little bit of Klosowski. Sorry. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Oh my God. I can't wait to do this. Okay. Some notes, just that help sort of to talk about that. When Klosowski here, and this is 60 some years ago, he's doing a reading of Nietzsche that I believe is deeply foundational to Deleuze's work. And what Deleuze would go on. I believe we're starting to see the first signs of, a lot of things, but this is, I think, the beginning of the body without organs and really how they would come to understand it. Klosowski talks about the way that, here, let me switch my camera up a little bit for people. Boop. Klosowski is talking about how the odd way that Nietzsche described the eternal return is not all life being cyclical. A lot of people mistake that when Nietzsche says you will, if you were stuck doing what you were doing now forever, and it's like, oh, well, it's that. No, it's every moment. There's an oscillation, a back and forth that will comes to be, will finds itself driving forward. This is the setup, and we play with memory, and we play with the emergence of it, the oscillation of I take in sensory data, apparatus, whatever, and the model of the world, my memory, my affective experience that has brought me to this point that is sort of overlapping. This becomes a thing that is revealed to me. At the moment, the eternal return is revealed to me as a law. I cease to be myself here and now, and am susceptible to becoming innumerable others, knowing that I shall forget this revelation once I'm outside the memory of myself. This forgetting forms the object of my present willing, for such a forgetting would amount to a memory outside my own limits, and my present consciousness will be established only in the forgetting of my other possible identities. The memory, when you see anything, whatever it is, you have a smell, a sight, the memory of what that thing is that bounces back, your brain dancing between what you're seeing and being in the world versus being within thought or memory. That dancing is the big deal. This moment, this memory, what is it? It is the necessary circular movement to which I abandon myself, freeing myself from myself. If I now admit to this willing, and by willing it necessarily, I will have re-willed it, I will simply have made my consciousness conform to this circular movement. Were I to identify myself with the circle, I would never emerge from this representation of myself. In fact, already I'm no longer in the moment when the abrupt revelation of the eternal return reached me. When you realize, and you have what he calls a high tonality, Nietzsche does, a Stimmung, I'm not going to pronounce German correctly. When you have this memory moment, you can get stuck inside of it, of course, but there's a freeing, forgetting, a breaking, a distraction that enables you to, what's this? Oh, this looks cool. That out of your own head. I have kids. You see kids zone out all the time because that's what they're in that space, and then they're no longer in there. You can't have yourself do both. You're doing the thing. You're experiencing one or the other. And if you identify with the circle, that constant setup, you would never emerge from that representation. For this revelation to have meaning, I would have to lose consciousness of myself. The circular movement of the return would have to be merged with my unconscious until the movement brings me back to the moment when the necessity of passing through the entire series of my possibilities was revealed to me. All that remains then is for me to re-will myself, no longer an outcome of those prior possibilities, no longer as one realization among thousands, but as a fortuitous moment, whose very fortuity implies the necessity of the integral return of the whole series. I genuinely find this work to be incredible. It's one of my favorite books, maybe ever. It's just beautiful. For in fact, this very moment in which the necessity of the circular movement was revealed to me, when you have this moment, you have this high tonality, as Nietzsche talked about it, the Stimmung, the high tonality of my soul, is required in order for me to know and feel the necessity that all things do return. If I meditate on this high tonality in which the circle is suddenly reflected, and if I accept it no longer as personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being, as the sole reality, I will see that it is impossible for it to not already have appeared to me innumerable times perhaps in many forms. But I've forgotten it, because it is inscribed in the essence of the circular movement, which I necessarily forgot from one state to the next, so that I can reach yet another state, be thrown outside of myself, even at the risk of coming to a stop. And even when I will not have forgotten that I had been precipitated outside myself in this life, I nevertheless had forgotten that I was thrown outside myself in another life, one in no way different from this life. I love this very much. It's one of the few things, like, it just speaks to me in like a really hard way. The French is so beautiful. The translation's very good. I don't really have any issues with it significantly, but in the French, it's so lyrical. It's incredible. Please, I hear someone talking.
In terms of like, I hear like a couple of like references to Pierre Kalkowski in different repetition, especially before the in chapter 1, right, about the eternal return, and it has it's kind of like Deleuze kind of hinting on, it's not a cyclical movement, of course, like he kind of was explicit, or at least explicit to me, in different repetition, right? But the idea of kind of like what it's not the idea of like we do these repetitions and we do it like we don't, like, we are not aware of these repetitions, right? Because these repetitions are working in the passive synthesis, which is kind of, you know, working from Husserl and taking from Husserl and Kant, right? Is that it presupposes even sensibility of the thing, or the internal sensibility, right? That determine, you know, you have Kant, you know, the determination of time, the apprehension is the inner self, which is determine the time, right, sequence. But it's about the contractile, I think, contractile spontaneity, right, which is a passive synthesis that we're unaware of, right? Or like even in chapter 2, when he talk about the there's two things for Deleuze, right? There's the, you know, you either forced to be, you know, there's the force of thinking, right? And there's like thinking that is, how can I say it? Thinking that is it's kind of like a triangle is equal to the right side, right? We can think the triangle without the equality of a triangle, right? We can think of that, right? So it's not kind of like, it's beyond the image, it's beyond what Hegel called Vorstellen, picture thinking. It's working beyond that, right? And he, by the way, he's working with Descartes also, right? He mentioned Descartes, which is the idea that, like, it's not like, the point of philosophy is not to create images, right? It's not to create images that oscillate between the copy and the model, right? It's something that is kind of I don't know, like it's something that the model is itself.
Yeah,
the model is
to run with this. So the way Klosowski runs with it, and it's a very large book. This is not a small thing. I read a small section of it. It's very, very long. It is worth noting that he ends up in a position where he doesn't really have a circle, not in the way that we would normally talk about circularity. And it is, I mean, this book is, as someone in chat noted, this book is dedicated to Deleuze. So it's clearly, these are conversations these guys were having. The idea for him that Deleuze takes, and it ends up, I would argue, is the circularity of what he's talking about in the vicious circle, is the way desire, which is wholly productive. Like, this is the big shift that I think is important. Desire is wholly productive, goes through the syntheses, and through it produces. The challenge becomes that desire, and the body without organs explicitly, and the way that it deals with the mechanistic versus the organic, yields over time the layers of affective experience. And that set of memories, that set of things becomes the constant pulse. And they say that actually there is a push and pull or a tug between desiring machines and the body without organs. This is the circle. The circle's between the two, that one is attracting and then one is repulsing, and they're going back and forth. It doesn't mean that that's it. There is, as they talk about it in Vicious Circle and as Nietzsche talks about it, there isn't only the circle. There's also the thing created by the circle, the multiple subjectivities, as Klosowski and Nietzsche lay out. But on top of that, there is the awareness of the circle, which changes your position within it, becoming effectively what they would say is how to become a body without organs. This thing that they're doing is very much the same language. I believe how D&G lay it out in Anti-Oedipus, it's far more effective to make people understand that it is not a pure circle, but instead a self-referential element in which we go back and forth and oscillate between two poles, which we do, as they say throughout the book. We oscillate between two poles, but that we also have the ability, as we step outside of that for moments that are then disappearing, as actuality sort of encompasses, to make understanding of that and then be aware of it, to counter-actualize, which is a big deal in Deleuze's earlier works that he doesn't visit as much in his later ones, which I really am sad about, because the counter-actualization in logical sense is incredibly important. Incredibly important.
You mentioned an important point about like the AI, right? And how the 3 step. I think that you mentioned like you lay out 3 steps, right? Either you kind of like, I would prefer not, right? I would prefer not to kind of like engage in this.
Bartleby the Scrivener, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right, and I think it's fascinating that like not refusing, but I would prefer not to kind of participate in this discourse. And we have like this oscillation, right? And it's not a circle. It's not actually a circle. It's kind of like, of course, like we are in the socius, right? Like we within the socius, but at least we have this kind of, what is the counter-actualization? Like, what is the implication of that? I guess, what is the implication of this counter-actualization? I would prefer not. I would prefer not to engage in the talks about AI or a talks about that, like either specifies the content or the things or the models that these AIs work, and we can like work about that, like, and I'm willing to kind of, if we are lucky and have time in the QC, I'm willing to kind of, we do a research about AI to understand and not to mystify the situation more, right? Because there's a lot of fucking idiots who mystify these relations, right? And they don't have an adequate understanding, right, of AI. Right? They produce YouTube video just for monetary circulation, monetary profit, right? And I want to divulge that. How about we do a kind of an understanding of AI, or at least like in the QC, like something that like.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know if you've watched it. I'm pretty happy with my AI video.
Yeah, of course. I watched the AI video. It's very, very fantastic, right? It's like if you read Moby Dick, like the Deleuze taken from Moby Dick. I would prefer not, right? It's from Moby Dick, right? And it's kind of fascinating that I don't want to engage in the AI kind of. I don't want to engage in a thing that is like a representation that a lot of people saying, especially the people who wear glasses. Sorry about that, but the people who wear glasses and kind of like, I'm not talking about you, Brooks, but I'm talking about the people who like there's kind of people. Sorry about this representational thinking, but a lot of people wear glasses because they sound smart or something, or they appear smart. But like these people, like that they do YouTube videos, or like these people kind of like who don't have an adequate understanding of AI and doesn't have research, they cite wrong research and they, you know, miss a lot of things, and they kind of like, they're kind of paranoid. They're kind of paranoid, right?
I mean,
They're kind
everyone
of
is.
like, yeah, they're kind of paranoid. And I think, everyone is, but like, producing videos about it, or my point is that producing videos about it, right? And not understanding where it's come from. It's kind of like the Marxist quote, like they taste the bread and they don't know where it's come from, right? They do that, and they never kind of read. They never, like, even Marx in Political Economy. I read the 3 volumes, by the way, Brooks. I finished the 3 volumes, right? Even Marx, in the section in volume 1, he cited historical examples about the rate of wages, right? And how wages can affect machinery and modern industry. And he even citing medical reports, Brooks, even citing medical reports from
Right.
the British ministry, right? These fucking people don't cite anything. They don't cite any research. They don't cite any. They talk for 10 minutes and for like 15 minutes, and it's boring. It's boring, right? It's really, really boring.
Right.
It's one of the boring things. Yeah, it's boring. It's boring, and there's no any kind of like understanding like of it. Or maybe they're like the Mark's time, you know? Because in Mark's time, by the way, Brooks, right? If you read the poverty philosophy, there is the humanitarian school, and there is the fatalist school, and there is the philanthropist school, right? And all of them end up like bourgeoisie, like end up like part of the bourgeois class. Even the humanitarian school, which kind of see the bad side in labor, right? They are. Marx said that even those like are part of the bourgeois class, because they fundamentally, they naturalize and they making these rule of political economies superior and natural, right? They are natural, like they kind of like Ricardo and Adam Smith, right? They make the division of labor and these kind of things natural, and they end up mystifying these relations, right? So I kind of like, I kind of scared that like some people kind of like understand AI, and we end up with kind of like the bourgeois class already, or which is already now, theorizing about like the AI, and they are doing it, but they don't know that they're doing it. They're doing it. But they don't
Right.
know.
No, they
Right?
don't know. Correct. They don't have the slightest clue. But again, we don't know we're doing the same exact shit when we're not using AI. Like, that's kind of the point. Someone in YouTube chat, I think it actually hits into this, asks, what do I think about the hypothesis of consciousness, awareness of beingness itself, as being the axiomatic phenomena of all existence? I fundamentally reject the idea, because what's happening when you do that is you're taking the image of things and mistaking it for the thing. The critique of Plato is that thought is not contemplation. Philosophy is not contemplation. You're doing a process, and the process you're mistaking for the thing. Consciousness is not really a thing. It's an interplay of forces. There isn't a consciousness. There isn't a subjectivity. Instead, these are elements that are produced by forces, and you're mistaking the process for a thing. And when we do that, when we make that mistake, we totalize a process. We simplify it. We make it so there isn't actually room to sort of run with. And again, we acquiesce to the larger representational space in general. We say, oh yes, no, desire will now find its way to fit within that space, within these transcendent conscious elements. But consciousness doesn't have the ability to be foundational. There's a huge bunch of problems with it that we can go through that sort of exist. A difference in repetition, I think, does a phenomenal job of going through it. But instead, stepping back and going, well, wait, if it's the process, then what's the stuff? Well, the stuff is the material, is the forces of material. It's the Spinozist God, for example, the one substance, or the interplay of forces in the Nietzschean sense. And these things produce consciousness, but this is still just the process, and mistaking that for the thing is the problem. It's why ultimately he wants us to get, and it's Deleuze's idea of the image of thought is really important, because thought is something that is forced upon us. We think when we have to deal with a thing that we can't simply deal with affectively. If my hand is cold, I don't have to think, wow, I burned my thumb, I better move it. Like, we don't think, we react. Thinking is when we can't just react, when there's a couple extra steps, or when there's more needed. It's evoked from us, the affective experience. And when we start naming things within that, when we mistake the process for the thing, when we make these moves, we start running into what is a much larger issue. And we start creating spaces like you were talking about, where we actually have a lot of damage being done. We have a lot of things we're doing to ourselves, because desire is no longer free to just connect as it does. Now, desire is channeled, conditioned. Things are placed in a position which just so happens to enable desire, but also represses at a grand scale. Grand scale. And that's the challenge. So your awareness is a product of a specific set of circumstances. Specific set of circumstances is going to be forces at play, and it is not deterministic. It's a no. It's not fatalistic at all. There's an exceptional amount of randomness, as well as things in time, as well as sensitivities or desensitization that's happened over time to the larger organism or to any specific mechanical apparatus that's doing it as part of you or part of what you consider yourself. As I like to ask, is your computer part of your brain? Well, I put notes in my computer that my brain remembers, and when it sees those, I remember things. So how is that not part of my brain? My fingers and hands have part of my brain, my nervous system, right? An octopus doesn't have a brain. It's got a ring with arms. But what is brain? What is consciousness? These things are totalizations that are dismissing the reactivity and the in-time nature that things actually have, and mistaking it underneath it. We are forced to think. Yes, absolutely. We're forced to think, and by reacting to the world. That's what it comes from. A difference in repetition. If you want a really good read on that, I would say difference in repetition is probably the best place that he goes over sort of that thing. And axiomatic approaches to philosophy, I think I just generally reject, but so did Deleuze and a bunch of his other sort of followers on. The idea that qualitative differences can be reduced to these quantitative relations systematically organized becomes problematic if you have an understanding of set or category theory. It just doesn't operate that way, because every set is only inherently real within itself or within its own relations, and they can't actually be judged against each other unless it's a set of sets. And still then you have sets of sets. It becomes the same basic infinity problem that we've seen elsewhere. Huge problem. But who is this we that is reacting to the mysterious I we keep referencing to? The thing we're calling that. That's the whole point. I mean, I'm referring to me, the ego that has been developed over time as a reactive thing to that. It's the same way that when I say I am hungry, I'm not hungry. There's no hungry. Humans don't have hungry. They have a series of affective experiences that over time I've learned is hunger. But that's not what babies do. Babies aren't aware of hunger. That's not how it operates. They're taught that it's hunger over time. Same thing.
Hey, Brooke.
Hey, Afnan, how you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Did you read for Evald Elenkov? Anything for him?
Sorry, you're gonna have to say one more time.
His name is Evald Elenkov. He's a Soviet Union philosopher. He did write actually about AI, and which is weird because actually in the Soviet Union, the scientists started trying to create AI since the 50s. When it was actually, I think you a little bit talked about it in your video. and that's actually mainly why I came today. It's because I wanted to talk about, to ask you specifically about one part of it. So yeah, in the Soviet Union, since the 1950s, they were trying to simulate the human brain to create consciousness through algorithm and mathematics and whatever. But then, yes, Ewald has many books on that. He talked about it in several things, but most importantly, you would find it in a book he has. I think it would be translated into English into something would be material dialectism or something like that. Anyway, regardless.
If you would, in chat, type out the name for me. That would be amazing.
Yeah,
so then I can find some stuff. If I can recommend on AI, one of my favorite books that was really foundational in my AI video was The Eye of the Master, which is about how actually AI, as we know it, LLMs, was explicitly developed with labor in mind. Yes.
Ewald Elinkov, and there is another book I'll maybe share later. I have actually a hard book, but I'll look for a PDF of it, and I'll try to share it in the chat with you guys. But regardless, so the main thing, okay, so what I liked about your video specifically, that it didn't actually talk about AI from this perspective that, this, like, it's always, this romantic authenticity that we're like, oh, don't use technology, or, like, I do understand that technology, the question of technology since Heidegger have changed rapidly. Like, we do understand techno as rather through rationality than other than, I do understand all of that, but I loved that you didn't talk about that. I love that you just went deep into it, talked directly about that it is actually not smart, it's not actually a brain, it's actually, whatever. But regardless, the thing is that there are some, the difference between transhuman philosophers or those who are actually like inhumane philosopher, like someone like Nick Land. I think you talked about him yesterday.
We did a stream on him last night.
Yeah, I didn't know, because I asked actually when I joined, when I got to know you, I asked if you ever talked about Nick Land, and someone told me you did about Pop Fisher, and then I went.
I usually don't because Nick Land is the problem is both he and Fisher are horrible. And when I say horrible, their writings are not philosophical. It's not interesting. It's Fisher, you could say, does cultural critique and commentary, and that would be as far as I'd go, but it's not philosophy. He doesn't deal with anything. He doesn't like build ideas or concepts. He's just sort of commenting on stuff. I find it very lazy. Nick Land is genuinely out of his fucking mind. And that was what we kind of watched last night, because I think most people don't understand that he believes in, that there's a numeracy around finding and summoning certain demons from another dimension that deal with Atlanteans and Lemurians.
Yeah, I mean, that's the CCRU book originally. The whole idea came from the novel, which is, of course, I was obsessed with Nick Land when I was in my 50s. Like when I was a literally teenager, just was introduced into philosophy. This is like 15 years ago. And the reason why I actually liked Nick Land back then, because there is this Iranian philosopher, Reza Negrestani, maybe you heard of him or something, who he became a little bit very famous in Iran. And since then, and he had some of Nick Land's idea. So all of us, a young generation who we come from that region, who we got introduced into Reza, we had to read Nick Land. But we were teenagers. But once I grew up and I read more, this was 15 years ago. But regardless, my whole problem with Nick Land. Did you read Nick Land? Or like only?
I've read all of Nick Land, and as I like to say, his very early stuff showed, I don't think it's good work, but it showed what would have been, I think, a very interesting career, that he took a right turn somewhere and went off a fucking edge into meth and crazy shit and lunacy.
Yeah. No, since the start he was on meth. It's just that they figured it out later, and he's
fair.
That's
Feng Numina is his stuff on Bataille is not for me, but it's interesting, I think. but again, it's not philosophy. Like that's the
Bataille
part
is
that
not
makes me nuts.
philosophy. On Bataille, it's not philosophy. You don't think it's philosophy on Bataille?
Correct. Generally spelled.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some Bataille that is. It depends on the Bataille we're talking about. Bataille's on laughter or on Nietzsche. I think he's doing commentary on philosophy that is actual philosophy work. His Accursed Share is actually, well, it seems aphoristic, and it kind of seems that way. He's actually building a huge amount of work and concepts within that. Other works of his, less so, but again, I don't demand it be completely. I think Bataille is, but Nick Land is fucking out of the whack job. He's a whack job.
I do agree.
Reza's pretty good. Chat's reminded.
Oh, you don't know Reza? Okay.
No, I do know Reza. Reza's. I made a joke last night that I think everyone out of CCRU is shit. I'm friends with Reza on Facebook, or at least my pseudonym is. I think he blocked me finally. I didn't comment or anything, but there is good stuff that came out of it. Nick Land is just what is known, and Mark Fisher is what's known, and neither of them are effective at what they do.
You do know Reza have, you do know Reza have turned against Nick Land a long time ago. Like I think.
Well, and yes, very much, very much.
Yeah. I mean, Reza is not. He is a good thinker in some sense. Like some books he has are good, but yeah, regardless of that. So back to Nick Land. So Nick Land, when we like those who follows Nick Land, whenever you argue with them regarding AI is not exactly consciousness, he does agree with that, and that's actually in some sense his main point. That it's not about human consciousness. It's not like those who promote AI that we will have a superior consciousness that is superior to like through human and stuff. To Nick Land, he doesn't matter whether this consciousness is in some sense really, smart or does really think or not. To Nick Land, it's all about, this having opening the whole ability for capitalism, because capitalism to him is AI, and it's all about capitalism.
No, so capitalism to him, he makes so many fundamental mistakes when it comes to Deleuze, but he sees the socius as effectively a body without organs of a much larger organism that is capitalism, that ultimately is using us as the desire pathways for desire, and labor is effectively desire for the socius, and as such, it's creating a much larger subjectivity that will end up, and it's like, okay, but dude, no, for like other reasons, but like, just stop it.
Okay, but how would you react to this exact idea? The argument to Nick Land is never about whether that AI is exactly consciousness. It's actually about it's not even trespassing. It's I don't know the word in English, but it's like I would say post. I would use post, but it's not exactly post. It's this accelerationism that you will reach eventually to capitalism, be fully opened to the main thing that was it with it, which is inside capitalism, which is AI itself. Capitalism being an AI doesn't mean that this AI that is right now in the world, ChatGPT or whatever.
So here's the thing. Yeah. In how Nick Land means it, I do not think that capitalism is an AI, because I don't believe there's an intelligence there. This presumes that the socius has its own recording surface that is itself being experienced. I have no reason to believe this whatsoever. Conversely, if we want to say what AI actually is, which is large-scale LLMs of representational guessing of pieces that are placed together with some level of deterministic, actually capitalism is actually what the LLMs are. Like, it's actually, that is it. Capitalism is breaking down all of the meaning, all of the parts, all of the pieces of everything over and over and over, and churning it up and shitting out new stuff. And it's like, actually, if you understand what AI, as we talk about it, not the idea of AI, but what functionally LLMs are, that's actually pretty close to what capitalism is. That's what my video was about, is it's just doing capitalism. And it's just married to it. But if you're going to assign intelligence to it, if you're going to do the thing where like, oh, actually capitalism's doing, it's like, fuck off. Capitalism is not some supreme being. The Jews do not control everything in a cave. Get out of your shit.
I mean, but like what I meant by saying that capitalism is AI to him, it's this idea that, so when we think of capitalism as AI, it's that there is this something that is in some sense above or more than all the parts of it. This whole that is always more about, more than all of its parts. Although, and that it is fully dependent on the part to give feedback back into it. But actually, those who engage within capitalism do not really know the feedback that they're doing. That's why he talks about,
Yes.
for example, economy being fixed by itself. Whenever economy has a problem, it gets fixed. In some sense, no one understands how, but it keeps growing, and capitalism tries.
Deleuze and Guattari really do, because how it works is, despite everything breaking, the way that things are set up, because we basically generate and build axiomatics and sets of things, a new set is just created to make reality work. A new axiomatic is made to justify reality as it is. And that ongoing pulse outwards that breaks, and then the recession back that is the repression, that back and forth is the function of capitalism. They outline this very cleanly in chapter 3. Very, very well, actually.
Yeah, that's true. And he does agree on that part. But his main thing is that is AI to him.
Oh, I know.
because
And it's silly. Yeah. It's silly. He's a silly, silly man. I prefer when he's actually like talking about demons and numbers and how syzygy. I was reading because I didn't want to, like, I just started, I pulled up the CCRU and I started reading it last night on stream because people were like, wait, what's he saying? I'm like, you don't understand. This is a thing. And he believes in time sorcery and it's like just the dumbest fucking shit. It's every time. But most people don't understand, because I think most people who get super into it, like I also, like you, I wasn't 15, but I was younger. I was in my 20s, so maybe more pathetic. But I got into it and I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's like, oh, there's all these patterns and stuff I can learn. And it's like, it feels like you're being part of a normal conspiracy theory. You're being part of things. You're being, oh my God, I'm getting knowledge that no one else has. You feel special. And that thing he's doing is so fucking powerful for that group. But I think everyone else who isn't part of that never read the CCRU and just pretends like he's a genius. Because when people talk about Nick Land and Moldbug and these fucks who are like, these are the minds behind Peter Thiel, I'm like, they are? Ask Peter Thiel if he believes in number demons. Like,
they are the subjugated group. They are the subjugated group. And the subjugated group. Yeah.
They are the number demons. We've now hit 3+ hours. I just got a note from Heather. It is time for some food for me. Otherwise, I get low blood sugar. I get cranky, and no one likes a cranky Brooks. I've also got to go help unpack some more stuff and things. I want to thank everyone for joining. Absolutely. And thank all of you for taking part. Afnan, stick around, say hi, and thank you very much for the donation. It means a lot. If you like what I do, as always, of course, memberships and subscriptions. Thank all of you, the handful of people who've joined. We've had a few members who've actually joined here, and I just want to say thank you. And all of that. You're wonderful. I love you. My Patreon, best place to do it if you get a chance. A couple bucks there, a cup of coffee a month makes a huge difference to me. Patreon.com/DGQC. Of course, join us in the Discord live, and you can be one of these guys yelling at me through phones that I have to turn down and correct everything with. Would be fantastic. Discord.gg/DGQC. I am going to send you off to someone else. It's Sunday's live right now, and he's watching a hilarious political stream that is actually worth watching, because it is the state of the union as far as I'm concerned. And oh my God, it's horrifying. So all of you on YouTube, I'm sending you off, and everyone you're in Discord, I'm going to bounce out. So I will talk to you all